We are live now, Your Worship.
Right, welcome back. We are now on to item 10.2, District Growth Strategy for Adaptation. Hamish and Natasha.
Thank you and good morning, Your Worship, elected members, and also welcome to our iwi partners who I believe are online as well. The report in front of you this morning presents a final district growth strategy for your consideration to adopt. It marks a work that we've undertaken over the last 18 months, but it's quite a key piece of work we've been undertaking because as Kapiti grows, the strategy helps sets out our vision, high-level approach for where, when and how the district grows over the next 30 years and will help us, guide us to how we grow well over that time. The work that we've undertaken over the last 18 months includes a number of workshops with yourselves and our iwi partners, feedback from the long-term plan along the way, alongside a range of discussions with stakeholder groups. This led to the development of our guiding principles and a proposed approach that we consulted on late last year from October to November, where we received 145 submissions feeding back on our proposed approach. You also had the opportunity to hear directly from a range of submitters and our iwi partners on that proposed approach at the end of last year. So the final strategy presented in the report in front of you today builds on that groundwork and that proposed approach and the feedback from consultation. So just to touch on some of the key changes that you might see and the focuses within that document. We've brought to the front of the document the principles and the link to our kaupapa matua and our spatial approach to the fore. And in particular, we've looked to knit the elements through our spatial approach more strongly, reflecting some of the emphasis that we fed back, including feedback on the importance of housing choice and affordability, how we value our environment and low carbon goals and also resilient communities. The approach focuses on the efficient use of existing urban areas and in particular intensifying around our town and local centres and creating more connected and walkable communities as they grow over time. This is supported by the identification of greenfield areas that will be progressively added to this compact form over time to meet those increasing needs over the next 30 years. This approach is not only core to achieving our low carbon goals, but also seeks to align itself with the national direction around the National Policy Statement on Urban Design and the more recent medium density residential standards that have been raised earlier today. Another key area of focus in the strategy that you see in front of you from that was consulted on is around the implementation and the focus of how the strategy will be delivered. The strategy itself relies on a number of vehicles for how it is given effect to on the ground and how those changes are given expression to. In particular, it's a key document that will help guide and inform future plan changes, which are the processes where the detail will be provided through the district plan on what that looks like across the district. And alongside that, it'll also help inform our infrastructure planning investment work that sits alongside the long-term plan processes, in particular looking out to the long term about what the needs are and what they look like across the district to meet that long-term growth. We've also heard about the importance of being well-designed and supported infrastructure along the ways and how we protect the identities of our identities of our communities as we look to the future. So the implementation section outlines about how we'll work closely with our iwi partners, government agencies and developers and others as we look to develop and implement our wider strategies, but also some of those regional growth projects that look to identify the information going forward. And then lastly, how we monitor and feedback on our progress is a key component that we'll look to align and feedback, and also reflecting back to the kaupapa in which we've set out around this work for the next 30 years will be a key project that we look to develop early on in the process to support the implementation of the strategy. So I'll take the report as read and then happy to take questions.
Right. Questions? Councillor Holbrook.
Yeah, thank you, Hamish, and thanks for the enormous amount of work that's gone into this strategy over the past few months or more. We had a public speaker today talking about an exemption for Waikanae Beach. I was just wanting your comment around that. How do the exemptions work, and would it be appropriate for Waikanae Beach? If so, why? If not, why not?
I know this is quite closely linked to some of the work that's underway currently around our urban development district plan change. So I might ask if Jason's there and happy to provide a bit of context relevant to the medium density residential standards on that.
Sure. Tēnā koutou katoa, councillors. Yeah, probably not the only question that'll come my way this morning. Maybe just to kick off by saying it's actually really good that we're having this conversation so early ahead of the actual district plan process, but there is a difference between the district plan and the growth strategy. So the idea with the growth strategy is to, I guess, as Hamish has mentioned, create a strategy level document that is aligned enough with national direction that it provides a good platform for the district plan changes to follow, which of course have to. I have had a conversation with a representative of the Waikanae Residents Association, who Mr. Dwignan was speaking on behalf of today, which was a good, healthy conversation with Andrew Hazelton. And we do anticipate having more conversations as we move beyond the growth strategy and we get into the district plan change space. So these conversations will continue. When it comes to the question of whether Waikanae Beach is a residential area or an urban area, our advice to you is that it is. There was mention of a couple of sort of criteria for that, one of them being the 10,000, being part of a labour market of at least 10,000. The whole of the Kapiti urban area, we are a tier 1 urban environment, and part of that definition actually is that that we exceed that amount because we're actually part of the wider Wellington market. So the reason why Kapiti is actually tier 1 is actually because of our proximity in large part to Wellington, and we are seen as part of that wider market. So with that in mind, the question of whether we are over or under 10,000 this quickly becomes a moot point. We're well over 10,000 because we're part of that wider Wellington market. Yeah, we have received advice, and we're comfortable with the advice that we've given you that Waikanae Beach is in fact a relevant residential zone, and therefore the MDRS should apply, except where there may be some qualifying matters. Now, we have a national direction which is largely one size fits all, but it does provide councils with the ability to apply at the site specific level qualifying matters. And the national direction on this lists sort of the things that councils can cite as qualifying matters, and they do include things like the presence of a natural hazard on a site, or values of particular significance to tangata whenua, ecological values, those sorts of things. Special character is not one of those listed by central government as something that councils can grab off the shelf and use as an excuse for not applying their central government expectations for heights and densities. It does provide a clause of any other matter, which can include consideration of wider things, and you can expect that we will be looking in the district plan space at that very closely, and we'll be looking to provide some evidence on that. But the test is very high. The evidential test for the any other matters part of it is particularly high. So it's important that, and this is the advice that has led to the growth strategy looking the way it is, that central government direction changes the world quite significantly, and there's no point having a growth strategy that pretends otherwise. because the district plan changes to follow have to give effect to that national direction.
Can I just come in there and test this? The impression that I got from Mr. Dugan was that his contention was that the exception concept is a tool that we should be mentioning early on in our strategy to allow us flexibility in a situation where you have a prescriptive national direction, and we want to be able at the same time as a local government to give communities placemaking an ability to be expressed and preserved or protected. I thought you was looking for the signaling of a tool of possible use, which would then be tested through the district plan issues.
Is there a question, Mr. Mayor?
Is that it? I got that. That's the impression I got. So the question to you then is that a way of signaling that in a strategy that allows local flexibility, despite the fact that we've got national directions?
Well, that's an option for councillors to discuss. What I can say is that when it comes to the intensification plan change, advice will be coming to council about that, and in the near future. And the application of qualifying matters is certainly something that we are giving very close consideration to, and there will be advice which proposes to you that there is an application of qualifying matters where the evidence suggests that is possible for things like natural hazards and the like. So it's up to council whether or not they would like to have something in the strategy which reflects that the district plan change is likely to include at the site-specific level some qualifying matter applications.
Can I comment, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
As everyone knows, a subsidiary document can't override, if you like, a superior document such as the government direction.
Yeah.
So my concern would be that whilst a strategy isn't bound by the government's legislation, you're actually setting yourself up for a significant argument that you can't win if you try to write something at odds with government direction. So I'd have concerns about setting up false expectations with our community if we tried to write something to say we're happy to consider local variations when we know we can't enforce it. So I'd like you to think about that as you debate it.
Right. I mean, the reason why I picked that up is also one Mana Whenua representative saying there's an agreement of that perspective that Mr. Dugan was expressing in their own rohe. So I'm just signaling that. So if you are saying that this is an area that should be tested in the district plan space, not in the strategy space, although I'm more inclined to think that the strategy would be giving some signals early on that this is a possibility within what the government is doing already. I mean, the impression I got from Mr. Dugan was that it is a tool that's been mentioned through what the government is trying to do in the negotiations of the national level. That's
yeah, but Mr. Mayor, you've heard repeatedly that the tool isn't available just because our locals want it at a local level. It isn't available to us. So we've sought that advice and you've heard it. So with all due respect to Mr. Dugan, it sounds like he has heard staff and he's quite appropriately saying, nonetheless, I wish to lobby you for something different. And that's entirely appropriate and great. And you hear it, and your problem is you can't override it, in my view. And I am concerned if you set up an expectation that we can do something different. In real simple terms, just because some people have got really fast cars and might want to drive at 300 kilometres an hour on the expressway because it's a great road, they can't do it. So we don't want to create an impression through a strategic document that we'd love to see the locals with the fast cars go fast. So I hope that helps to.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is what I'm hearing is that your legal advice says this is not appropriate. Do I understand that the legal advice, does it say that's a battle to be fought at the district plan framework, within the district plan framework. And that's the question asked Pat, whether he would be taking legal action to challenge it at that point.
So if I may, Mr. Mayor, there are a range of different tools. There's a risk that we're actually talking past each other about which tools we're talking about. The qualifying matter tool is certainly one that through the plan change at the site specific level.
Okay, moving along.
I did have some other questions, but I'll let some others ask now. I might come back in later.
Compton.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, just picking up on that sort of discussion. So we've had a sort of discussion about the legal challenges from the community, or the potential of them when this gets to the intensification plan change part of the process further down the road. But my understanding is that that's not the only potential avenue that a legal challenge could come from. And I'm hoping either the CEO or Jason or someone might have some more information on this, but is it possible that the government itself could initiate a legal challenge if we're seen to be sort of inappropriately thwarting the intention of the relevant national policy statement or the Act by using sort of spurious or dubious reasoning for what those qualifying matters might be? And I think it was Phil Twyford at the time, I think, said that if it was in relation to Wellington Council or Auckland maybe, where you're saying you'd see them in court if they tried to, protect special character areas and that. And this was all off the basis of councils have rightly or wrongly been accused of deferring sort of to NIMBY interests in the past rather than enabling housing, which is what's got us to this point. Is that, am I sort of right in that, that the government itself could come in and take us to court via the Ministry for the Environment or something if we're seen to not be applying the Act and national policy statements correctly when it comes to that plan change?
There is the ability for the Minister to intervene in planning processes, and that ability for him to intervene is bolstered through the new requirement.
Perfect. That's why I didn't quite know if it was through court or how they'd do it, but yeah, I knew that I had a feeling there was some additional sort of ability for them to do it. My second question, and frankly on a slightly different topic and a much easier one, hopefully, in the recommendations, we've got that editorial group, which has got the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Chief Executive. And I was just wondering if, given that sort of housing is central to basically this entire discussion, whether it would be appropriate to include Councillor McCann in that editorial group, given he has the housing portfolio.
I'd be happy to take guidance from others.
This is assuming that he would like to do that, obviously.
I'm sure he would. I don't see any problems. Chief Executive.
Oh, there's a thumbs up from Rob.
We'll volunteer him for many things then. That's great.
Don't tempt me.
As Hamish said, we're more than happy, and just pass that in the resolution. We're very happy with whoever you'd like to be on any editorial work. Thank you.
Cool, perfect. Thank you very much.
Right, Gwen, you finished? We got Waikanae Board Chair, Mr. Westbury.
Hi there, how you going? No, I think most of my questions have been answered by Wayne and the team there, so I feel quite happy satisfied with the responses.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for your work on this. I do have a concern as RMA Hearings Commissioner, and that is that there have been many applicants from developers for opening up of their greenfields through this process, and they have largely not been done. In fact, I think all of them have been told that their greenfields are not suitable and are put into a 30-year plus part of this plan. They're then asked to go apply for a district plan change. how can we be assured that through the Section 72 reports and other parts of that process that they are going to get a fair and unbiased hearing and that their application will be seen in an unbiased way when council have already publicly rejected their request through this public consultation process? It's not a criticism, it's merely an observation of the processes and how they're going to work together in the future.
I guess I can provide a bit of context to part of that, and I guess and then maybe Jason might be able to add, or Natasha, more about the other side of the planning processes. But the strategy itself and the basis of the strategy was developed off the back of our guiding principles that we developed in the first place, and some of those guiding principles were then taken through to some of the initial evidence and scenarios work that we did to identify where we saw future growth best located, given some of the factors that were looked at through that initial assessment work, which included some of the constraints of the site, but also how they related against those principles and locations for growth. And so that was some of the information that has come through and has been available to support our proposed approach going forward. And it's also that approach that was considered with those additional proposals that have come forward through consultation as well, that we've gone back to. So it's those principles that we developed at the start, as well as some of the information around those sites to look at that future growth areas. I guess that doesn't preclude, as we've discussed, there's separate processes, and maybe Jason or Natasha can talk about the other planning processes that take place. But I guess it's just differentiating that long-term view of the strategy versus other planning processes that are available.
Okay, can I just tease this thing out? Councillor Elliott, are you saying that a private developer who's been excluded this time round wants to make a proposal through a private plan change because council has taken a particular position that council will not be looking at it favorably, or they'll be biased? If that's your position, then you know, as a hearing commissioner, that the council uses independent commissioners, panel commissioners, to hear the contestability of the applicant, and also if council has got problems with it, the planners will be putting forward the reason. So the independent panel is the way the decisions will be made transparent, and any bias will surely there would be bias. That's why you have independent panels.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'm just seeking clarification and voicing my concern right now that that perceived bias can be mitigated and that those plan change processes can be fair. But could you answer a further question to this?
No, can we just go back to Natasha if you want to respond to that question?
Yeah, sure.
And also, I think the last round, councillors did give a signal that we want to have a workshop around the private plan change processes. We want to know when that's happening. And
I think it's the Section 72 reports that are prepared by staff that are concerning me at this present time.
Natasha, do you want to respond?
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Mayor, and in fact, you answered half of what I was going to respond with anyway, which is that generally we do use independent hearing panels. In addition to that, those independent hearing panels will make recommendations back to council. So councillors are still the decision makers on that. The other point that I would make, the question you raised, Mr. Mayor, around the timing of a private plan change briefing, is we have got one scheduled for coming to you in early to mid-March, I think it is. I can't quite remember if it was the 8th or the 15th, but it's around about then. It's not too far away, so you will get a bit more information then about the private plan change process and how those decisions are made, and can show you about the staff are trained to be approaching these matters in as unbiased a way as possible. They will look at a range of issues, including constraints and things like that at some of these sites, and those are some of the reasons why these haven't been pushed forward at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Elliott, have you got another question? No. Councillor Pravano.
Thank you. I didn't realise I was quite up yet, but that's all good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all the hard work that has been done getting it to this point in time. So I just wanted to, I've got two areas I want to talk about. One is the one with the plan changes and one with Waikanae Beach. So when you go to the document under, I think it's from section 54, specific issues under the new government requirements, it says, it's actually written on there that it says that it's directed certain levels of intensity, that's the NPSDU initially directed certain levels of intensification, leaving council with some discretion upon the level of intensification. And then at the end of 2000, actually, I think it was actually the day after we went out with this, they changed it. But I suppose what I think I am hearing is that even though there was the discretion before those new policy statements came out, council staff were not actually using any of that discretion that they had. And I suppose, and even though Jason was saying, I think it was Jason was saying that this should be a good councillor conversation. And I suppose there's two parts of it, as I mentioned to Mr. Dugan. One is the subdivision of sections and 3 stories, and then the other one is actually these local centres being raised another story to 4. And I suppose I'm just wondering, I suppose, why Waikanae Beach has been put in that category where, for example, when you look at Otaki Beach, there's a very similar scenario there, but that hasn't been included. And to me, I don't understand the rationale between the pair of those. And I certainly agree with Mr. Dugan in terms of it. If we agree here, that sounds a very strong message when whatever councillors around the table are going to be saying, well, the last council agreed to this in the growth strategy. And so that, really they must have had some good understanding about it, so potentially it's going to be pushed into the district plan. So my question after all that is, my first question is, why specifically Waikanae Beach? And I suppose also, actually, I'll add in the 2 parts of Mazengard, whereas they're tiny little, they don't even really have any commercial centres. So how come these 3 areas have been included where there's others that are probably bigger that have not been included? And where has been the discretion?
If it would assist, Mr. Mayor, I can answer that question. It's a pretty straightforward answer.
Thank you.
There is a policy in the district plan which lists the centres at the various hierarchies, and that has been the foundation for the approach in the growth strategy. And Otaki Beach is not a centre listed in that policy, whereas Waikanae Beach at Te Moana Road is.
Right.
Is there a historical reason for that being listed in that, Jason?
There will be reasons why one's listed in that policy. Yes, there will.
But you're not certain quite yet what they are.
Well, I haven't done the forensics on the history of that policy, but it is the operative policy determining what the centre's hierarchy is for the district.
Okay.
Next question.
Yeah, so my next question is, so in reality, given the coastal sections proneness to liquefaction, what is the reality of properties being built and built to 3 and 4 stories along the beachfront or along the beach margins, in the likes of Waikanae Beach?
I can speak to that too, Mr. Mayor, if it would assist.
Thank you.
So, liquefaction is a risk issue for many areas in Kapiti. The district plan does require a assessment at the subdivision stage of that risk. The building code has just been amended to require an assessment, and the recently notified Plan Change 1B, it proposes to remove a rule in the district plan that duplicates that expanded requirement in the building code. So I guess in summary, that risk is adequately managed in our view across the district plan and the building code.
Okay, thank you. So my other question too now relates to what Councillor Elliott was talking about. So it's my, I suppose, very high level understanding that the reason for this growth strategy is to be able to control where we have our growth. And, you know, as I've previously said, I'm on the fence about, you know, whether or not some of these greenfield developers should be included or not included in it. But I'm just interested to know if they're not included in it and without any constraints put on the areas that they're actually looking at to develop, is that potentially removing some of the control that we're actually trying to put in place here? So, yeah, is it removing some of the control we're trying to put in place here?
So I guess from this is just replicating I think the point that was made earlier. This is a strategy, and so
Yes.
it doesn't actually control directly. That's a place for land use decisions is directly under district planning processes, and so this is guiding document, setting out our vision for how we'd like to grow, taking into account other factors around principles that shape what that looks like, as well as other infrastructure assessments and support that kind of long-term thinking. So this is there to guide both those district planning processes that will kind of layer the details and also further investment planning processes through the long-term plan. Okay,
thank you. So I have one last question, if you may, Mr. Mayor. So in the strategy, I think it's on section 148, or maybe it's 147, it's in that general area. It talks about business growth, and I suppose what it talks about there is sort of along the lines of thinking about it rather than actually having some guidance there. And I'm just, you know, it's almost like that's actually, shouldn't that really be included in all this? Because, you know, as I think we've discussed previously, we're looking at the bigger picture, you know, the whole picture here.
Sorry, I'm not quite clear which section you were talking about.
I think it's
direct reference to the
148.
document.
Yes, I think it's 148. Unfortunately, on the hub, the numbering is very different to what it is when I go onto the KCDC website. So I wrote down 148. Maybe it's page 148. I'm not sure. I'll just hold on. I'll just go into here. It's probably 148. I can't see you now. I don't know if you can still see me.
So Councillor Pravanov, page 148 is the one that's titled Rural, Protecting Productive Land and Providing for Lifestyle Choice. Is that it?
It's 147, actually. It talks about, I think it's this one here, it's talking about how that's going to be looked at sort of further down the line. Yeah, here we are. With the growing economy and population, we will need to plan for more business land over the longer term. And I suppose really, to me, that should be encapsulated in this, because this is our growth strategy, and it you know, includes housing as well as our, you know, our business growth as well.
I can speak to that. I mean, that alludes to the housing business assessment that you were recently updated on. Just covers the current one only as an update on the housing work, but originally the first assessment and the next one, which is soon to get underway, will look at both housing and business land. So that's a piece of work that's due to commence towards the end of this year, I think, and over the next year. And that will actually look at, similar to our housing demand, it'll look at our business land demand across the district as well. And so that information will then be available to layer as evidence alongside the strategy to feed into other future processes as well. So that'll help inform the likes and link to our economic development strategies, some of the proposals that we have to scope further development of town centre plans as well. For instance, are all things that will link to that evidence that will help inform future directions and shapes of the various locations across the district.
Yeah, well, I suppose that this growth strategy, particularly around the town centres, isn't detailed enough to say, well, this street's going to have X and that street's going to have Y. Is that correct? So it's not a case of we're making these decisions now. It's not going to say, well, I wish we'd actually thought about this whole picture.
I guess the strategy itself is a high-level strategy. It's about providing a broad overview to the future, and it's trying to link to those pieces of work and other pieces of work underway that will help shape and kind of reflect those objectives we have for future growth through them.
Right. Thank you very much. I think we should start with Councillor McCann.
Thank you very much through you, Mr. Mayor. Before I get to a question, if you indulge me, I'd just like to thank staff for all the significant work that's been undertaken. It's been a fantastic process. I do want to just hone down on something that may have already been covered, just to get some clarity around the qualifying matters. When we're talking about qualifying matters, Hamish or Jason, what are the things that council considers qualifying matters? Because it's quite clear from some of the presenters, including today, that their qualifying matters are quite different from the ones that I thought we'd be focusing on, which was whether the land is suitable, whether it's flooding, whether there's other things that prevent us from building. So could I get your comments on that, please?
I could offer something there, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
And essentially, it's that the growth strategy and the adoption of that is the kind of the stage that we're at. I'm very keen to move forward and have conversations with council about the details of the intensification plan change and the kinds of qualifying matters that central government have provided us with an opportunity to consider, but also perhaps clarify some of the matters where that's really, really hard. And if I might start with that in advance of the conversations that we've yet to have on the intensification plan change, what central government has made really, really hard, quite deliberately, and you can read it in the NPSUD policies themselves, amenity values and large areas where district plans have formally provided some kind of protection for a character trait. Central government has not enabled council to look at those things very easily. They've set an incredibly high bar for evidence. They've talked about site-specific qualifying matters, not broad areas, but site-specific. And it's quite clear from their direction that they want to move the dial and move it towards change that enables greater density in existing urban areas. And they are also quite clear in that direction that they're prepared for that to have some effects on things like amenity values. It's written in the NPSUD policies. So when we do have that dialogue in the very near future, we'll be reflecting on that, but we'll also be going through where central government has provided opportunities for councils to look at specific sites and put forward in their intensification plan change provisions which are kind of sensible, in the sense that heights and densities on a site with no constraints and with no particular sensitivities when it comes to ecological or cultural matters are obviously a lot more suitable for maximising density than sites that aren't like that, sites that do have natural hazard risks, or that do host ecological values or cultural values which could be quite significantly impacted. So we do have the ability to talk about those things, and we'll do so when we move past the growth strategy and into the intensification plan change space.
And just to hone down on that, because I think it's important, this is a growth strategy. It is our perception that what you're saying is that people's view of their community as having a special nature probably doesn't meet those qualifying natures. They are more technical in nature, because otherwise this growth strategy starts to come undone with everyone's claim that they have a special natured area.
Yeah, I'm signalling that it's going to be really, really hard to be able to do some of the things that people understandably want to do. We're not obviously. I mean, we live in the district and we understand that the character of the district is special. But we have to live with the central government direction. We just have to, and that direction is quite clear and quite blunt in the MPSUD, that amenity values, effects on those are actually, they're going to be the sorts of effects that people have to some extent put up with in order to address the housing challenge.
Thank you. I don't really have a question on this, Mr. Mayor, but I do want just to reference it. I was really thankful that Councillor Elliott did raise a question about private plan changes, and I think we really do need to note that councillors are underprepared on this particular issue to have expert knowledge, because we have yet to be briefed. So I was very thankful for some of Natasha's comments to clarify how private plan changes will work. I do want to come to a question which is on page 13 of the PDF that was online, which is our approach to enabling sustainable growth. And in that particular diagram, if we look toward Taki, we've got an area of green which we have said we're going to enable particular growth. And I just want to make some comments and ask some questions around this. There is an area to the north of Otaki that has not been included in our planning. What I'm concerned is that while we went out for consultation, we were then not able to give that area the same type of look that other areas had. And is that a fair assumption that we have made some decisions without all the information, that some of the other areas where we've looked at greenfields?
If it's in regards to the one future urban zone.
Yep.
Sorry, the Otaki, the farms north, that is an area that while we'd looked at a number of sites around Otaki, that wasn't included specifically in the initial assessment work that we'd undertaken, which is why the report identifies that further assessment of that is warranted. And we'll look to undertake that as part of future work under implementing the strategy itself, to then determine the appropriateness of that and any future potential long-term use or as a study area. So that it would go through a similar consideration process as to a number and range of quite an extensive amount of the remainder of the district went through to inform our initial processes and what went out in the consultation.
So, Mr. Mayor, the issue I have here is that when we went out for consultation, this was raised with us, as we expect developers and property owners to do, and I don't feel that we've had the capacity to be able to give that our full attention. And recommend in point 66, the wording is it's not recommended that the area is included in the current growth strategy, but that a preliminary assessment of the area be undertaken for possible inclusion of the area as a long-term growth area. I'd like to ask staff if it's possible that wording is quite vague and quite loose, that we prioritise in some way or other that we do actually undertake that assessment, so that it's not just put out in the words long term, but is undertaken when we have the resources and capability to do so. Is that a possibility? And the way I would approach it is through an addendum noting that this area hasn't been adequately looked at, and therefore this would be the appropriate action that we would take. Because my concern, whoever's about to speak, is that we're clearly signalling that that's not part of the area, but in my mind, because we didn't have the capacity to undertake that assessment, we haven't done it due diligence.
Having said that, all I can say is, look, at the workshop we had specifically on those particular areas, the agreement we came to was to have a preliminary assessment of the area as soon as possible. So what you're suggesting is that we tighten that up to ensure the timeline for that is, so how would you tighten that up in terms of when and whether that will fit in with how council's priorities?
Yeah, that's part of the, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you've hit the nail on the head. That part of that consultation has to include iwi, and it has to include technical aspects. I don't have the information. Councillors don't have that working information as to when's possible. So what I'm trying to suggest is that we tighten it up so that when staff can provide that information, they take the action as quickly as possible, because we just need to make sure it's assessed in the same manner that we've assessed other areas so that we could move forward or not move forward. What I'm really concerned about when you look at page 13 and where we're signalling growth is those areas we've examined thoroughly. This is one area where we haven't.
Right.
So,
Natasha.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly it is our intention to be following up on those recommendations, including the assessment of this site as soon as it's possible to do so. I do need to be clear, though, that our priority in terms of capacity of work, our priority needs to be with progressing the urban development intensification plan change. That is our immediate priority in this area, so it may take some time, in the vicinity of 18 months, for us to be able to undertake these further assessments. Having said that, given that this is a 30-year strategic document, it wouldn't be the sort of document that we should be looking at reviewing every year or two anyway. So while we will look to bring this work forward as soon as we're able to, and we will look at programming that in as soon as feasibly possible. But there are some real challenges at the moment.
So I suppose what would be needed is to have a small piece of work done, just tightening up. So a separate work, small piece of document that says when you think this is possible.
We can certainly provide some information back to councillors on timeframes about when we think we'll be able to be getting to these documents. Wouldn't be appropriate for me to commit to that at this point in time.
Right. Rob,
Mr. Mayor, just to finish that part of the questioning off, is it appropriate that in an addendum we note that we haven't assessed that land and it was brought to us after we had conducted the sorry, I'll let you go.
Can I just clarify on when you talk about an addendum, Councillor McCann, are you wanting something to be appended to the strategy document itself, or are you looking at something that you'd like to be notated in the minutes? And so the report is what the report says. Are you wanting a further recommendation to be added into the report, or what are you? I guess what I'm asking, what are you seeking from us?
The outcome's what I'm seeking, so I'm probably asking for staff advice as how best to get there and how it's useful. I think we're all in agreement it's going to happen. I just want to make sure that future councils don't look at this document, then make the following decision that we're not going to proceed in that direction because we've, you know, the evidence pointed against it, when actually we don't have that evidence at the moment. So just really asking your advice, would it be an addendum to the document we're working on, or an addendum to the minutes, or that's in your hands for a suggestion?
So probably something in the minutes might be the most appropriate way of recording something like that. We can also make sure it gets dovetailed into the implementation work.
Cool, thank you very much. I've got one further question, which is really just when we're talking about smaller areas, and we had a number of submitters, and obviously we've got this and the district plan information dovetailing. So can you clarify that issues such as 157 Fieldway Waikanae are better dealt with at the district planning stage when we discuss that document? Because that would be my understanding from the staff advice.
Yes, that's correct. There are some of the sites that were suggested through this are of a scale which wouldn't be appropriate to be included in a 30-year strategic document, and it's most appropriate for them to be considered through the plan change process.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Mayor, I'd certainly like to signal that I'd like to move this at the appropriate time.
Mr. Mayor, could I just offer a very brief point, because it might add to the previous discussion about the need for resolution. On page 40, on page 161, and page 40 of the strategy itself, there is actually a notation in the actual implementation section of delivering our strategy that actually specifically refers to the point in the paper, particularly around the sites north of Otaki and a number of others, directly notifying and recognising the need for further preliminary work. I don't know if that goes to making the link across from the paper into the actual strategy itself and the undertaking for that work in the future as part of the implementation.
Well, I think Natasha's suggestion on top of that was to ensure it's entrenched in our minutes, is noted in our minutes.
Okay.
I think that should cover it, and I think Rob was quite happy with that.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have Kirsten. Did I see your hand go up before? Kirsten.
I'll just let you know that Denise is sitting here next to me, and he might wish to add some comments after I've spoken, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Right. Oh, firstly, just thanks to Hamish, Jason, and Andrew and others for keeping us informed and talking through the detail with us. Being very patient, and it's appreciated. So we're aware that the government legislation has played a big role in this work, and it's quite strong and restrictive. As you know from our discussions over the last 6 months, that we've been pretty engaged in this work, and we're all aware that there's much more demand than housing in Otaki, and you've heard us voice our concern about the effect this is having on our people. So yes, we're keen to find solutions and are working on that, and including the opportunities to have papakainga as a big solution for our people. For us, that's in a range of places around Otaki, and we haven't gotten to the point of identifying those places, but they're mostly rural, and having those discussions with council. And we just want to flag that at this point that's where we would like to see some of the growth occurring. Now, for this legislation, you may recall we had a bit of a big sigh of relief moment in December when we were told that the RMA legislation would not be required at this point for Paikakariki and Otaki. So we were a bit surprised at the recent briefing to see the MDRS being proposed to go across the whole area. So we're actually still digesting that, and it was a bit of a shock to us because we'd spent, the Christmas and January area thinking, oh, okay, that's good that's not going to apply here. We're not going to have the sort of crazy haphazard growth that it will bring. So we're still working through it. We do have some response though. We know we need to plan for growth. Our desire is to ensure we do this in a way that prioritises the protection of our waterways and environment. So if there was a way that it could be delayed for the Otaki area, it would give us time to plan things a bit better to achieve good growth. You know, our roads and infrastructure aren't ready to cope with it. We're not even able to cope with the amount of traffic in the Otaki Township at the moment. An increase in population is just going to be a bit crazy. I know that infrastructure growth is planned. Not sure that it's going to be enough. And we know that you're in a hard spot because it's been just forced on us. One of the other points for us, I think, is that the rapid transit stop isn't here in Otaki yet, and we don't know when that will happen. One of the things that sits alongside that is the qualifying matters could give us an option to be less enabling in coastal areas, especially those close to rivers and streams with flooding zones. It's a fairly high level of risk. Takutai Kapiti project is likely to provide us with good information about this, and I don't know if there's government initiatives that give us the opportunity to slow things down in those areas. I've heard your responses, Jason. I'm not quite clear what sort of qualifying matters you are planning to look at. And so getting that information sooner rather than later would be really helpful. I'm not sure if the coastal areas, the immediate beachfronts and the areas close to rivers are going to be proposed as qualifying matters. So that might allay some of our concerns if we could be informed about that. Probably a workshop or briefing if that's able to be done before the change at district plan changes come to council. We'd really support a more measured and deliberate approach for any area, actually. We're not looking for special treatment. It's just where there is an opportunity for us to do some better planning, that we look to take that opportunity. It's really about protecting, enhancing and living sensitively with our beautiful whenua wai and green spaces. We also have a number of heritage sites here in Otaki, including Raukawa Marae. It's in an urban zone. It's right in the township, as most of you will know. And so it does have some protection around it because of its status, but we're concerned that it won't be enough. There are shops like right next door to it, and having 4 to 6 story buildings right next to us is a little bit scary for us. We're not opposed to growth. We just want to do it well, to have areas that enable all of us and our environment to thrive. And I'll just add, I think I agree with those concerns about high-rise buildings. I know it can be hard to imagine our area changing so rapidly, but it really didn't take long for Auckland to change quite rapidly, and it doesn't make for a healthy place to live. These sort of things are going to create haphazard growth in urban areas and not well-designed towns. So we hear the message you have about needing to apply MDRS across the whole area. And yeah, just want to let you know that we are opposed to it, the highly enabling changes, and are looking to talk to the government about it. We're not sure if that's going to achieve anything, but we have to give it a go. And then, yeah, just to say again, the request is to get more information about the proposed qualifying matters as soon as possible. Did you want to?
Kia ora, Denise.
Tēnā tātou, tēnā koe. Kuru, tēnā koutou te kaunihira, koutou ngā kaumahi o te kaunihira. Thank you, Kirsten, just for giving our brief response to all the kōrero and the papers that we've been reading through here today. So I pretty much endorse what Kirsten is saying, and to say that we've had recently, as you know, had the opportunity to meet with your team, Hamish, Jason and others there. And again, endorsed Kirsten's thanks to you all for being so supportive to us and being able to make time available for us when we need to be able to discussion. I think after the recent meeting in January with the team, and I'm talking about Hamish and Jason and others, is to say that when we realise that the medium density and residential strategy needs to be kept on the table, so to speak, especially for our little township centre here in Otaki, is that I think my last response on the day that perhaps our energy and focus now needs to be with central government rather than local government. And that, yeah, as a partner to the Crown, we just feel that, you know, perhaps the land that we're still trying to get back is just going to be taken away from us again in further development, which is going to suit more people coming into town rather than the people who live here and future generations. So we don't see that the plans on the table right now going ahead in the immediate 10 years is going to make a difference to the social housing needs of our people. And so that has to be our focus. And if our focus requires us to strongly oppose the proposals that are on the table, then that's where Ngāha Pū Otaki will need to stand. I think, yeah. Kia ora, tēnā koe, kuru, tēnā koutou.
Right. Do staff want to make any specific response?
Yeah, look, perhaps if I can start off with a response to that, and then I might hand over to Jason in terms of addressing the question around qualifying matters. Kia ora, Kirsten and Denise, really appreciate your time, both here today and also the time that you've put into considering all of the information that we've been putting in front of you over this time. Now I'm conscious that in terms of the application of the MDRS to Otaki. I think it was my comments in late November, early December, which gave us all a sense of optimism that there might be a different solution possible for Otaki, and that was based on information in the report back from the Select Committee, which signalled that for smaller urban areas they were looking at some alternative that might potentially allow for an exemption. The wording on that didn't get finalised until the later in December. I think it was 21st of December that the legislation finally got adopted, and that's really when, once we'd had a chance to analyse that, was once it became clear to us that it wasn't necessarily going to provide us the opportunity that we had thought it was going to present. So I guess apologies on my behalf for opening the door, thinking that there was going to be a hopeful solution there, where it turned out to not quite be that way. So apologies for that. I will hand over to Jason, who may like to make a comment around the qualifying matters now, if he's there.
Thank you. Yeah, I am. If I'm being heard. Well, firstly, I wanted to say thank you very much to Denise and Kirsten and Kim and Honor for all of the hours that you've been spending with us, with all of the other things being thrown at you from this, that, and the other place. It's been a real privilege to work with you over that time, and to keep working with you. So we're making really good progress on Papakainga provisions. And yeah, I appreciate that we've sent a heck of a lot of paperwork across. There's been jargon left, right, and centre, and acronyms here, there, and everywhere. It's not easy to engage with that. So thank you for your patience with us. Qualifying matters, we'll probably have a chat offline about some of the paperwork that I have actually sent you already about that, but yeah, and not to get ahead of discussions in the next month and beyond, but we have, I think, publicly already signalled that we'd be asking council to consider some kind of a qualifying matter along the coast, and that it would in all likelihood be informed by the best available information, which is the information which will support the Takatai Kapiti process. So yes, council can expect to see some advice along those lines in the near future. Other qualifying matters which you mentioned that you can expect to see is the continuation of the application of the existing flood risk provisions in the district plan. We have a district plan that already conditions the level of development that can occur on a site depending on the extent of flood risk. The advice that we're proposing to bring to council would see that continue on as a conditioning of how much can occur, even where the MDRS or other provisions would apply. That would live on as a layer for just managing how much development can occur in a flood risk area. Ecological sites, wahitapu sites, those are other kinds of qualifying matters which we do intend to bring to council for their consideration, ultimately to include in a draft plan change to consult with the community.
We knocked off. Can't hear him. Jason.
I think Jason is frozen. He may need to exit and try and jump back in. His screen seems to have frozen completely.
Should we move on to the next question, Your Worship, and hopefully we can sort Jason out?
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I just, if I could, I just wanted to start by acknowledging and tautaukoing the comments from Kirsten and Denise Hapara. It's been difficult through this process when the government's come over top and applied their rules in our local communities. And I know from the Hapo Otaki, they're strongly opposed to the view of anything more than 2 stories high. And I'm not sure what we can do about it. So I guess a question around that possibly to Natasha is, with the comments around taking the concerns to central government being probably the more appropriate avenue to follow that up, is there anything that we can do as a council to support the reasons behind that, acknowledging their view around allowing good growth? What can we do to support them in that, even if it is just through the Mayor's office or through information? And then I've got a couple of other comments.
Yeah, look, in some ways it's actually possibly a question for Kirsten and Denise in terms of what support they would like us to provide for them as they take that to government. But certainly through the Mayor's office, we'd be happy to help in any other way as well, as officers as well that they might see fit.
So I guess in the interest of time, rather than having Denise and Kirsten reply now, could we at least commit to providing that support, conditional, in terms of their approach to central government?
We can certainly make that offer to them, absolutely.
Sure, and just acknowledging it's in their hands in terms of what that looks like. I have, Your Worship, I just want to check, I have a couple of proposed minor amendments from an editorial perspective. I'm happy to leave the wording of that in the hands of the editorial committee. Are you happy for me to raise them now, as they're not questions, as I'm not sure where else?
Well, I think it's easy if you can just raise them down without, and signal that, just as a signal.
Yeah, sure. And so, look, I have raised these offline with staff, with both Hamish and Sean, in terms of the respective teams that relate to this. The first one is around the transport solutions that are required to deliver on the strategy. So a number of the housing solutions within the district will require investment in transport. And although the document refers to that, my words to Hamish was, and it's not a criticism, it refers to the solutions, it refers to some of the entities, but I just really want to strengthen that. And particularly around Greater Wellington Regional Council being our more predominant organisation that delivers public transport. So I'm not going to, I have got some wording if elected members want an idea of what we're talking about, but I do really want to leave that in the hands of the editorial committee. But it's just something along the lines of that the growth, in terms of the responsibility of it, that the growth strategy notes that the aspects of the strategy are crucially dependent on significant investment and increased public transport options currently provided by Greater Wellington Regional Council. It is therefore vitally important that the strategy is considered and acted on when developing their future annual plans, long-term plans, and transport plans to give effect to the strategy. And part of my point around this is that we can indicate that it's their role or responsibility, but we really want to send a strong signal to them that it's imperative on them to consider our growth strategy when adopting or developing their annual plans and transport plans. So I would just like some stronger wording around that in there. And like I said, I've talked to Hamish and Sean, and from what I can gather, that doesn't seem to be a problem. And then I've got a second one. I just want to wait and see if you want a response from staff, or just move on to the second one.
Well, let's the staff respond to that. And also, I don't think that the councillors will have any objections to that, but that's what I think.
No, I previously mentioned that there is some references in there, so we're quite happy if the table's comfortable to consider how we beef that up, because the provision of infrastructure is a key dependency on the vision and achieving the vision for our places, and connectivity of places, not just along the trains, but across east-west we've heard, and within and across our communities, which is buses and other forms of public transport. So quite happy to do that if the table's comfortable for us to go away and put some words in.
Yep, I'm thinking that we are comfortable. Anybody not comfortable? No, that's fine.
I'll move on to the second one, or the last one. So the last one is just around future growth that's indicated around the Peka Peka and Te Whoro zones. So this isn't, I'm not suggesting any change to the work that we've done around priorities within the development of those areas. The document stays as it is, but just inserting some wording around, and again, leaving this up to the editorial team, but for example, increased transport connections, for example, a full or partial interchange, rail station, etc., are considered to allow future growth within that growth area of Peka Peka and Te Whoro.
Staff response.
Yeah, again, we're comfortable to go away and have a look at emphasising, just noting that we do emphasise a lot of the rail connections at the moment, and it was kind of implicit about some of the other connections we might need to look at to the future, so we can look at making that more widely applicable to all connections, including potential roading connections as well.
Right. I assume all the councillors are also okay with that. Yep. Okay.
Thank you. And just finally, a comment around the issue that a couple of councillors have brought up around the future work. I just want to note that I did raise it in the briefings that when we've been told as elected members around the future work, that we did need some timeframes around that. So I think, Natasha, I think you did that today in response around the existing priorities and pressures, and that you wouldn't be able to look at that work for around 12 to 18 months, I think is what I heard you say. That's critical for us to be able to respond to those developers if they do raise it with us around their particular areas. Because, for example, I know that Otaki North Farm, they are moving on that development now. That's not future for them, but obviously that's for them to deal with in terms of how they approach that. So thanks very much.
Right, is Jason back?
I am, Mr. Mayor.
You disappeared somewhere, you're back. So do you want to continue?
Yeah, I'm not sure at what point did I disappear? I might have been talking to myself for about 5 minutes, which was a great chat. But yeah, I'm not quite sure where I left it off, Mr. Mayor.
Good Lord.
Was it talking about qualifying matters, I think?
That's right.
Yes, and I think I would have talked about the fact that we were looking to come to council with advice about a coastal qualifying matter, which would be based on the best available information, which will be the information that will be the foundation of the Takutai Kapiti process. And I also mentioned that existing flood risk provisions in the district plan already provide some management of development on sites which have various levels of risk from a flood risk perspective, and that those provisions would continue to apply post application of the MDRS. And and also that there are district plan provisions to do with protecting ecological sites, important trees, and also wahi tapu sites. We are in conversation with iwi about wahi tapu sites and whether there may be indeed some additional sites which should be added within urban areas, given this additional risk of degradation of those values that the MDRS may create. So yeah, range of qualifying matters that will be coming to council in the near future with advice on.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much. The next person is Councillor Hanford.
Cool, kia ora, yeah, and echoing everyone's thanks to the team. I think this is a really awesome piece of work and it was a pleasure to be reading through as part of our agenda for this week. So thank you so much. Yeah, echoing everyone's thanks really. My questions are relatively broad and kind of about the practical application of the strategy and also the kind of longer term life of it. Obviously it's got a 30-year kind of lifespan and wanting to get a sense of what will happen at the end of that 30 years. But my first question is how will we practically be making sure that this doesn't just live on the shelves? Obviously there's, you know, in conversations with developers and things like that, and you know, using it to help inform various other changes that will be made to different plans and strategies. But I just want to get a sense though of how it will be used across the organization day to day, so that those principles, those priorities, those aspirations are things that are coming through in conversations that we're having both internally and also externally.
Yeah, so I guess on a day-to-day basis, it's one of our key strategies. So we'll be looking to support internal communication around the strategy and what that looks like. One of the key things that is different in the final strategy itself is that implementation approach. And as you'll see, there's lots of links there and complementary associations with a number of our strategies, including the economic development open spaces right through to some of the work that's kind of underway around coastal and also stormwater work. So obviously we'll be continuing to work closely with and across those pieces of work, which is indicated through that. I guess one of the other key things that is quite important around the process is our development or proposed development of a monitoring framework to support the strategy. So we have a previous piece of work that we've been holding off reviewing until the strategy's been completed. And the intention is to review and develop a monitoring framework that can reflect the principles and the overall kaupapa around this work that we can use to guide and kind of like feedback as part of an ongoing process. And one of the feedback mechanisms we have is we do have the annual requirements, even though we currently report a bit more frequently on the national policy statement, those quarterly updates you get from the housing stuff from me quite regularly, or the team. And so we'll be looking to actually align future annual monitoring around growth strategy progress more broadly than just the actual the housing elements, to touch on other components as well. And that'll also sit alongside some of that evidence that I was talking about, such as the housing business assessment that needs to be done every 3 years. So the idea is to actually knit together a variety of these bits of projects and evidence we've been doing kind of, I don't want to say ad hoc, but all of a sudden we kind of like roll them into a rolling ongoing process and feedback that can then feed into both strategic and day-to-day and broad projects as well across the business. So that's just a couple of the mechanisms that are in there. Hopefully that comes across, because it's quite hard to communicate a lot of that stuff, but we're looking to also have a presence, an ongoing presence that will develop to kind of like show and share that that frequent monitoring and feedback as part of the implementation as well.
Yeah, cool. That's a great answer. Thanks, Hamish. My other question around, obviously it's kind of lifespan, and then in 30 years time, will we be, or whoever is obviously the council of the day, be reviewing and creating a new growth strategy, or is it at that point that then we decide kind of what's needed based off of the growth that we've experienced and then the projections looking forward? Like, when will that decision kind of, obviously that's a long way away, but just to understand the kind of flow and effects of what comes next, really.
Yeah, and I think that monitoring and that kind of responsive and footing process as part of that will feed into it, that help identify and trigger. But I think going back to a comment that it might have been Natasha made earlier, it's not, as a strategy, it's not something we review every year or other year, but take some time, particularly with some of the implementation processes themselves, take a few years to layer in. But I think previously I might have mentioned that strategies tend to possibly get reviewed or looked at anywhere between 5 to 10 years, but certainly not something that sits on the shelf for the full 30-year period, given the extent of the changes. But obviously that process will be subject to potential changes that might occur and the need to actually review that. So again, that monitoring process should be able to come back and kind of identify how aligned it remains to be, or whether there's step changes, or what kind or form of any kind of review may need to take place when, rather than it just going on the shelf and kind of sitting there until someone decides it needs a touch up.
That sounds good, and not just looking at 2050 and going, okay, well that's when it ends and that's the moment, that then we'll look at what needs to happen for the next 30 years. So that's really reassuring to know, and would just like to add in my support too for providing Hapu or Taki with absolutely any support that we can offer at whatever level that needs to be, and would just like to really hope that we can make that a priority as well, and using resource and appreciating that resource is relatively limited and there's so much on our plates at the moment, but recognizing that that's extremely important for the well-being and good of our whole community, and especially our mana whenua, and also just want to tautoko the comments that Councillor Coots made around transport links and the need to really push for that and make sure that that's a priority too, and the conditions around around that, and making sure that's low carbon and accessible to everyone. So, but again, thank you so much to the team for the work.
Right, Councillor Provanov.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So I've got a couple of questions that I've raised through the conversations that have been going on. So Jason, some time ago, a little while ago, you made the comment about how the central government was changing the dial, and but you also said, and maybe I'm grasping at straws here, that you said that it would be really, really hard to change, but you didn't actually say that it was impossible to change. And I suppose I'm just trying to tease out, if we buck the trend here in terms of what central government were suggesting, how will we go about that? That's my first question. I think Natasha might have mentioned.
I'm happy to do my best to answer that, Councillor. There are different kinds of central government direction. There are central government directives like thou shalt remove the minimum car parking provisions and you shall do it by X date. And there is no room for any interpretation of that. And just by the way, as of the 17th of February, we have actually done that as council, so we've met that requirement, just to get that in there. But there are other kinds of central government direction which are more of a policy nature. And within that category, there are ones that are quite directive, and then there are ones which can be interpreted in a wide range of possibilities can be left. My personal view is that the central government direction through the national policy statement, which changes the dial away from councils being able to, as they have done in the past, be very protective of amenity values and move that dial towards councils having to be very enabling of housing. That is a directive, but not to the extent that the removal of car parking provisions is directive. But nonetheless, it is still a very strong policy. And so the reason why I have tried to word things the way that I have is because it's not a thou shalt remove the minimum car parking requirements kind of direction. There will be an ongoing discussion, I would predict, that happens through the submissions process on the district plan change. This is new legislation. There is no case law about how it shall be applied. But we need to provide advice to you as council about, I guess, in our interpretation of that as experts in the field, how it should be applied in the district. And given how strong it is, our advice to you is that that the MDRS will need to be applied, that the MPSUD direction around the centres hierarchy and that centres should be the hub of intensification is quite strong, very strong, and that there's not room for manoeuvring around that. And that the qualifying matter issues are very much a site-specific issue, and that central government has limited council's discretion about the kinds of things that can be contemplated. Yes, they've given this any other matters opportunity, but they've also said you need a massive amount of evidence to be able to justify that, and it's still site-specific. So, as I said earlier, it would be no good to have a growth strategy that pretends to the district that something can be done when, in our view, in all likelihood, it's very unlikely to be done, and that's what's shaped our advice to you.
Okay, because I suppose really it's central government's a pretty blunt tool, making decisions for all these tier 1 areas around the country where in reality nothing fits the same box basically, and it's people on the ground who can see where it probably isn't going to work quite as well as it could do. So that leads me on to my second question. You mentioned about looking at these coastal qualifying matters. So obviously this is not going to feed into this document that we are looking at today, but how will it feed into probably the district planning process? I assume that that's where it will be feeding into.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. It's a good topic of a bit more conversation. So that probably the first thing to do is be very clear that we're not talking here about the coastal hazards plan change. We're not talking about getting ahead of the Takatai Kapiti process. We're not talking about saying,
oh, I've lost him again.
We seem to have the same problem
right,
again.
So can we move on to Councillor Holiday? Councillor Holiday, you got a question that
checking, was Councillor Pavano finished?
No, Jason, I had one more question, and that actually relates to page 150. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'll just put that off.
Hello.
It relates to 152, and in there it talks about, it's my daughter ringing up from Dunedin. I'll just let it ring.
Is she partying the sort of no COVID positive party?
Oh, I tell you, it's rampant down there.
Sorry.
So 152, it talks about city, I think the word in there is mentioned city thinking, and unfortunately I couldn't actually search the whole document because of just the formatting, but we had a conversation, was in one of the briefings, about using that terminology, and I think that it might have been just one little bit that might have snuck in there, and I know that the city, you know, how obviously we're growing and we will be a size of a city, but I'm not quite sure whether that wording city thinking is probably quite the best wording in there. Jason's still frozen, I see. I'm not sure whether someone else likes
well, I can respond to that. I know that originally it was up in one of the principles, but I think we had a discussion, and I
yes.
I know Rick called it, and I think some of the councillors were quite supportive of the challenges for future growth and thinking to the visionary 30-year component of it so that it was still helpful in that context about what that looks like, but not obviously to the connotations of what a city means directly as a distraction. So we actually talk later on in our, because we talk about obviously a city centre as well, I think is part of the context around our, as a way we've used to express our key centre in the Parapara Umu area. From memory, I'm just scrolling to it now. And it's there more of an expression of how places connect together and function, and that kind of maturing over time of our centres collectively coming together.
Yeah. So I think it's, I agree that, with the concept, but I'm just wondering about that wording, and it's in brackets, and, whether people actually understand what that means.
I guess the best way is hopefully it's expressed throughout the document, because my understanding from the discussion is it's trying to encapsulate thinking to the future, thinking broadly, so we get the right connections and the right places and neighbourhoods connected now, because it's not all going to happen overnight, but it will happen is kind of a term I've heard a few times. So of course, it being preemptive and planning ahead, and then having that thinking done. And this comes back to infrastructure as a critical one here as well, because if we only think about infrastructure after the fact, well, how do we jam it back in after the fact when the horse is bolted? So I guess city thinking is encapsulating how, as a collection of communities, how do we plan and how do we, develop going forward and grow well? And city thinking's kind of encapsulating some of that, particularly in and around the Parapara Umu wider vicinity.
Okay. Thank you. I see that Jason's back now. I don't know whether
Jason is back online. He's able to hear again, I believe.
I am sorry about my internet connection.
There's two of you now on my screen.
There are
one frozen and one alive.
Jason, did you want to try? Okay? Did you want to try speaking without your video on? That might help with your Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be lots of complaints about that, but yes, I'll turn it off. So I think where I left off was I was going to explain the coastal qualifying matter and really what it was and what it wasn't trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what it's not trying to achieve is it's not the plan change which responds to the recommendations from the Takatai Kapiti process and updates the what are old coastal hazard provisions in the district plan. That is not what the coastal qualifying matter topic is about. That's a future plan change. It happens after the Takatai Kapiti process. Just wanted to be really clear with everybody about that because there's potentially room for confusion. That's actually even something we raised with central government in our submission on the RM bill, as we were worried about people getting confused about it. So let me explain what it would be about, and it's relatively simple actually. It would be about making sure that the government mandated additional intensification, the MDRS, and if there was any overlap with a centre's sort of walkable catchment thing, that wouldn't apply within the coastal qualifying matter area. So that would be the policy intent if that makes sense, that it's actually about not enabling more than the district plan currently enables within that coastal area. So there's a subtle difference there, but it's a massively important difference. If I'm not clear about that, please do ask away and I'll try to reframe it, because it's really important that we understand that.
Yeah, I'm clear about that. Thank you. I'm not sure if anyone else has any questions. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. And look, just want to thank the team for the quality of the information that we've been getting over the months, which has sort of made today a heck of a lot more understandable. I think everyone's questions today have really tied off a lot of loose ends with regards to filling in those pictures as well. I just got a few things I want to touch on. one of the concerns or something I wanted to talk to was in future, with regards to this document is talked as a guiding document. And I guess a little concern is maybe in 5 years' time, say for argument's sake, this document's used by council officers literally rather than as a guiding document. What's the risk of that with regards to decision process?
I guess the key thing is it's trying to express our vision as a whole, and so that, as we've mentioned and has been discussed today, will get translated through a number of different vehicles, including one of the key ones is the district plan itself. So it will become interpreted via that and in the appropriate form through that process. I guess at the same time, as mentioned earlier with Councillor Hanford, the discussion about the monitoring and review and update of it is, I guess, if there are elements of the document itself that aren't expressive of the future views and aspirations, then that's something that could possibly be brought up and then trigger potential future reviews. Does that answer your question, or?
Yep, no, it's just to tidy off because generally it has been talked to as well. I just want to hark back to the Waikanae beach situation. I'm not going to delve too deeply into it, but I just wanted to get some clarity just from my head. When we're talking about it being a town centre area, it's noted in the document that Timawana Road and Ono Street. Is that referring that it won't go further than Ono Street as such? Or are we not that specific with regards to, will that come in when we start getting site specific as such?
I think that's just a locational reference provided to the area. The area itself, as Jason alluded to, is already identified. The specific local centre area is already identified in the zoning of the current operative district plan. And then the 200 metres is the kind of around that area walkable catchment.
And just again for clarity, would we have, through the process, have the ability to contract that in regards to specifically the local centres side of things? I appreciate we've got the MDRS and that's a whole separate conversation. But that 4 stories stretching into that old beach area, I'm sure, I mean, it does have concern and it has been covered very, very well already, but it was just wondering if there is leeway around that at all, or is that something to come as part of our future discussion when we start getting site specific?
I might leave that one to Jason, but what I would say is that the local district area is a pre-existing area within our district plan hierarchy, as Jason's already mentioned. I might leave for him to field any questions about what that looks like as a process more widely going forward.
I'll just add into that, I appreciate that it is on that list, but that list was put together quite a long time ago, and one would think that maybe some priorities have changed or where those centres could potentially be.
Okay, there's a couple of questions in there. Maybe if I start with the extent of walkable catchments, it has been quite carefully crafted. The extents are sort of reflective of where in the hierarchy a particular centre is. So you have at the top of the hierarchy, Paraparaumu Metropolitan Centre, where the walkable catchment is largest. There are town centres where you have like a middle-sized catchment in terms of walkable catchment, and then much like I suppose the Three Bears and the Porridge story, the local centres have the smallest walkable catchment. So it's been quite sort of carefully crafted in that way to have a logic to it. And I guess there are some risks with starting to play with that logic. But we'll talk about that more, of course, in the context of the intensification plan change, which will really sort of bring that part of it to life.
Okay. I just wanted to note, actually, I'm getting a little bit tired of government telling us how to do things with such broad strokes and us having to sort of deal with the consequences of all that. I'm sure that's just...
You got a question there somewhere?
Yeah, sorry, yes, I do have some more questions. Just wanted to make a comment. Look, in regards to rationales, if you like, there's talk on number 32, pages 112, 13, but directing new greenfield development away from coastal areas. Yet in our intensification around town centres, we're looking at 6 stories literally on the waterfront. I've sort of expressed concern around this. I think that's too high. But do we have any leeway, or is there leeway with regards? Well, what's the story in regards to that? On one hand, we're being told to stay away from coastal areas. On the other hand, we're being told to go up 6 stories in those coastal areas.
I could potentially answer that question too, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
So the strategy has not attempted to map out the spatial extent of qualifying matters. That is something which the intensification plan change will do. And so if we look ahead to future conversations, we'll talk about the extent to which a coastal qualifying matter will somewhat change the picture at that more fine-grained level compared to the bigger picture that you're seeing in the strategy.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. I guess so. So I'll hark it back up to Otaki now, with regards to the Otaki farm that's been looked at being developed as well. I appreciate that the general document's looking towards intensification, and that may be why this is our scope. The work has already started by that group with regards to the development of that land. I was just curious to know, how is that enabled moving forward as such? Does this document sort of restrict that, or does it sort of help to enable it, especially if they perhaps, for argument's sake, go through a private plan change as such?
I can have a go at that one too, Mr. Mayor. So the option of a private plan change request being lodged with council is open to any developer, irrespective of what the strategy says about a particular piece of land. Now, obviously, the reason why you have had submissions from particular developers seeking inclusion in the strategy or a change in their priority is that they would like the strategy to be as friendly to their proposal as possible. But it does not prevent, irrespective of what the strategy says about a particular piece of land, that does not preclude somebody from lodging a private plan change request. And there is high level direction at the national level in the National Policy Statement for Urban Development itself, which requires council to pay attention to those requests, to I think the word in the NPSUD is out of sequence developments. The NPSUD requires council to have a really close look at that and to not dismiss those sorts of requests outright. So there is more than the contents of the strategy at play when it comes to considering those requests.
Okay, thank you for that. Look, I noted Kirsten's talking around the marae and Otaki. Just want to perhaps flag the same sort of concerns, I dare say, for the marae down in Waikanae as well with Atiawa in regards to ongoing development too. I guess that'll need to be brought into that conversation at some point as well. That's it from me for now. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Martin. Rob McCann, this question time's finished. Nobody else. I think Rob McCann wants to test an amendment. Do you want to put your amendment up?
Yeah, I think so with your leave, Your Worship, obviously very supportive of all of this work, but just want to test a very minor amendment. Do you want to go to share that amendment so everyone can read it, Fiona? As a suggestion. So it's a very minor amendment that a preliminary assessment of the area north of Otaki be undertaken for possible inclusion as a future growth area and should be undertaken when internal capacity is available. From my point of view, it just adds a little bit of urgency to an area that we haven't put as much due diligence in as others. Also, I think it goes without saying that Nahapu should be involved in those discussions, but this also does put staff under any stress because it is their decision around when capacity is available, but it gives me the confidence that we are looking at that area with some urgency.
Right. Can I ask Natasha whether staff are comfortable with this?
Yes, look, I can't see any issue with that. It largely repeats what's already in the strategy itself and what we've committed to doing.
Right. Just clarifying
Your Worship, we have Councillor Elliott that has a hand up.
Yep, I can see that, but can Rob, this amendment you're making is to A.
I'm struggling with enough screen, so yes, this I think that's right. I don't have that right in front of me. Sorry, Your Honour.
Okay. Councillor Elliott.
Happy to second this amendment, Your Worship.
Okay, so if that's the case, you will. Anybody else on this? No. Okay. The amendment, as you see.
Councillor Randall has raised a point of order in the chat function.
Councillor Randall, what's the point of order?
Point of order is there is an interest. Councillor McCann has an interest in this, yet he's moving the resolution. Is that okay? Acceptable by you?
What's the interest you're talking about? Is it a pecuniary interest?
He agrees to be a member of the editorial group. I'm not saying it's a pecuniary interest. It is an interest.
No, that's ridiculous to say that's a conflict of interest there because he's in the editorial board.
Well, not ridiculous, but I accept your decision.
Thank you very much. Now moving along. So has amended. You can see on the screen, and B moved by Councillor McCann, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Councillor McCann, right of intro.
Thank you very much. Not that I want to be suggesting to Fiona what we do, but could we move back to the screen so that we can all see each other again as we discuss? Thank you very much.
So
first of all,
amendment, right?
We just discussing the amendment because I've asked to move the whole thing. So can I have a point of clarification there? Otherwise, happy just to discuss the amendment.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, my take is the substantive has been moved by Councillor McCann and supported by Councillor Elliott. She did refer to it as an amendment, but we hadn't moved to substantive. So it is as proposed by Councillor McCann is the substantive.
So you're saying this is substantive?
Correct.
Okay. Right of intro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I first want to acknowledge the incredible work of the staff and the contractors, councils and submitters from all across our region with individuals, developers and of course iwi. Look, this has been a massive piece of work to help underpin the kind of development that we've all agreed that we need to see. Many of us know that phrase that growth comes whether we like it or not, so we want to make sure it's good growth. And it's been really, really good to see that we have developed our guiding principles, our growth principles, and that they're sustainable and they're good for the community. But at the same time, I really do want to acknowledge that, you know, there's a phrase that I'll steal from Councillor Compton, and I think he's the first person I heard him say that it's, you know, there's, I wrote it down here, housing catastrophe does play into growth principles because there is a significant overriding concern that we've seen government put on top of what we would normally have undertaken. So those, you know, the fact that we have so many families without homes, living in garages, homeless, or struggling to get on the property ladder does affect how we approach our growth principles. And I note the concerns of iwi, I note the concerns of Waikanae and everyone else who owns a house, that government has overridden this process with a very blunt tool, but it was the general direction that we were trying to head. It was just a really blunt way of doing it and a way in which we couldn't try and push growth into certain areas. But it is the general direction where we've tried to say that we need significant intensification, but intensification that's both good for our community and especially good for our environment, because that is one of our overarching concerns. So I think while the government has put a bit of a blunt tool on, and it's certainly watered down the effect that we as a council could have had about the direction where things are going, I think this growth strategy will really underpin a whole lot of the other work that we're about to undertake with the district council, the district plan changes. So I really do commend all councillors to vote for this. It's not a perfect piece of work because we are not masters of our own domain anymore. The homelessness situation in New Zealand, the developing situation where people are unable to own their own homes, has overridden some of the localism that we would normally encourage. So I commend everyone who's put time and effort into this document. I think we've done a really good job as a council, and hope that you'll support it. Thank you.
Right, open for debate. Kirsten Habita.
Oh, kia ora, and apologies, this might be a little bit reactive, so I might not be as articulate as I might be some other times. My comments about the amendment, about the land north of Otaki, and I have to just note that I think I said it in a briefing, that particular area is in the middle of a whole lot of Māori land, and there's also some Māori land running through the middle of it. There's a marae and a urupa and a church bordering that land. We haven't had any sort of interactions with the developer that's proposing that area. And I hear that there'll be some consultative sort of process with us, but we'd be concerned about that area given some sort of prioritisation by having that sort of wording added unnecessarily with this strategy going through. I'm not clear on why that additional wording needs to be added. There's already wording within the document about it. And so I know it's not binding or meaning the staff have to do something, but it does do something by having that wording in there. And I just don't think it's necessary, and actually would have concerns about it, particularly because we've had some dealings with the developer or landowner in that area, and we would fully expect that sort of development would displace more of our people. It wouldn't actually be helping us, because that's been our experience with this person over the last 20 years. I don't want to make it personal. That's just a reality, a statement that's what we would expect from that sort of thing being prioritised. And so, yeah, wanted to share that with you and don't agree with the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you. There's obviously been a lot of passionate concerns raised about this strategy, both for and against what's proposed in it. And some of those I think have been really genuine and well-intentioned, and they're highlighting real issues that people are going to experience with growth. But some of the concerns I think have been self-interested, and that's both those who have supported it and opposed it. So there are people who obviously will benefit from development, landholders and that sort of thing, who want them to open up, and they'll get a profit out of it, and we need to be honest about that. And some of the people opposing it, they are fundamentally interested in preserving the status quo of what they're able to enjoy, and effectively the de facto impact of that is locking other people out of it out. And what I would say to everyone involved, and Rob McCann did steal my phrase before, but it's one that I'll use again, is that we've moved on from having a housing crisis. We're having a housing catastrophe. If you look at just the ridiculous increase in house prices over the last 2 years, which came on top of house prices effectively doubling twice over the previous 2 decades. And all of this is why we have to have this fundamental step change in not only the level at which we provide housing in terms of the density and how many properties we fit within individual sections and the amount of people living per square kilometre and all those measurements, but also the housing typologies as well, to provide more choice and to bring down the overall cost of housing or make it more affordable, I should say. So it's held at a more reasonable level so that incomes can progressively catch up to it. And there's a chicken and egg situation with this too, in that to get the infrastructure needed to support good growth, and that's a genuine concern that people have, is how do you get that infrastructure? We've heard it with mass rapid transit, we've heard it with roading, we've heard it with water infrastructure. How do you get that to support that growth? And one of the fundamental ways that government looks at this when they're deciding where they're going to help support growth is not just that growth is happening, but actually what sort of future growth is enabled as well. And if we, try and embrace our inner Trumps and put up walls to stop growth happening and stop people moving here and try and dissuade them, then that government funding is going to go to other places where the need is greater and they've got their ducks in a row and they're more embracing of change. Because it's a really fundamental equation of both society and economics, and that's supply and demand. And we know the demand is there for growth. Kapiti has gone from being about 10,000 people in 1962 to I think about 32,000 people in 1992, and now we're 57,000 people in 2022. So every 30 years, we're more than doubling our population, give or take. And that's what we're sort of projecting, that we'll carry on at the very minimum that growth of another 30,000 people in the next 30 years, which is probably conservative, because one day we're told Transmission Gully will open. People are going to want to move here. Well, they already want to move here. Working from home has been transformed in the last couple of years. And while there might be some drift back to allowing people to work in town, I think I think most of us know that a lot of people want to work from home. And if you look outside today, if you forget some of the bad weather days we've had in the last couple of months, you look outside today, even this morning, my wife and I were heading out with our son for a little snack before he went to school. And it's just idyllic. And that's why people want to move here. We can't stop people wanting to move here, but what we can do is make sure that we plan ahead of time for making sure we accommodate those people who want to move here. Because nothing is going to destroy the character of Kapiti more than if we try and preserve the current status quo in amber. It's going to lock my children out of the housing market, or lock their children out of the housing market. It will supercharge the gross inequalities that we've seen in the housing market. They've really accelerated over the last 2 decades. And I can't stand for that. I can't stand to see this situation get even worse under my watch. So it's for that reason that I wholeheartedly endorse the district growth strategy and the amendments that Councillor McCann has included in there, because I think that this is going to create a really exciting future for our district. It's going to preserve our quality of life. And changing character isn't destroying character. Character has always changed. When Wellington's no longer the small little colonial settlement at the bottom end of nowhere as it was in the 19th century, it's now a thriving metropolitan city and one of the most envious places to live in the world. And Kapiti is increasingly becoming where the people from Wellington want to move to. We can't change those sorts of dynamics. We need to work with them to make sure that actually we continue to have that great quality of life going forward. And we need to embrace change. We need to make the most of it. Because, some of the stuff I hear is our young people are excited about the change and the possibilities that come. They're excited about the possibilities that growth will bring in terms of educational opportunities here in Kapiti, not having to leave the district. They're excited about the growth in employment opportunities and the diversity of employment opportunities that can come from having some sort of proper metropolitan city centre here on the coast as well. Now, we fully acknowledge we need the infrastructure to support that. And that's what this document does. It means we can go to Greater Wellington Regional Council. We can go to the central government. We can say, hey, look, this is what we're doing to play our part in tackling this housing catastrophe so that, people can have roofs over their heads, families can have safe, affordable, healthy homes to raise their kids in. Come and help us realise this vision for making Kapiti the most desirable place, or keeping Kapiti as the most desirable place in Aotearoa to raise a family. So I want to thank staff for the incredible work they've done under what's been some quite challenging conditions as we've gone through this process, and there'll be big challenges going forward in terms of the sort of plan changes and that come out of intensification. And in terms of growth, I say bring it on.
Right. I just need to, at this point, take my opportunity to speak on this matter to clarify and give assurance to Mana Whenua representatives around this table, so to speak, from Otaki. The view of the amendment that's been put in by Councillor McCann, supported by Councillor Elliott, does not make it a priority or includes it into the current immediate development stage. The report already contains in Appendix 1, it mentions greenfield site assessments, 3 particular assessments, one in the Ottawa East, which is the Tini village, the second one in Timwana Road, and the third one being the specific one we're talking about in Otaki. So it's included in that. All it does is to just signal this earlier. Having said that, we know that the original growth framework projected development areas has specifically identified Otaki as a growth center, not only just in Kapiti, but also straddling Horowhenua. So the sooner we have a preliminary look at this, the better it is, not only for the general mainstream people, but also Mana Whenua in Otaki, because inevitably the consultation exercise will be done. I can understand the red flag that has been put up by Kirsten. That red flag needs to be signaled to the proponents of this development. So hopefully this will engage them earlier than later. That's just a clarification and reassurance I want to give. Thank you. The next speaker
Your
is...
Worship, before you move on, just to signal that Councillor Holbrook has suggested that that the recommendations A, B and C be taken separately.
Yep, we can do that. Councillor Hanford.
Yes, thank you. I feel like Councillor Compton, I'd just like to total everything that he said, and yeah, would just like to add on probably a few things to the sentiment of, you know, obviously the housing catastrophe, and not only seeing the people who might be on the front lines of that catastrophe as numbers or statistics, but as people who have real, genuine stories, who are connected to whānau, who are connected to people right across Aotearoa, and who many of us have actually had conversations with. And so I feel like this strategy, although it's a document, has real opportunity and hope for those people and for people who will call Kapiti their home in the future. And I think that's kind of what I've been trying to connect this work to, is understanding that, yes, within kind of the younger population, there is a lot of concern about home affordability, house affordability, where we'll be able to live, where we'll even be able to rent, what housing will look like, how we'll be able to stay connected to our place of work or our place of study. And all of those things are such kind of real concerns that many young people, not only young people, but just people in our district and in Aotearoa generally have at the moment. But I think what this provides is a real framework for something that will hopefully create an even more exciting Kapiti with more opportunities to both live, to work, to play, to be a part of reducing an individual's carbon footprint, and also as a district for us to build a more sustainable Kapiti of the future. And so I think, yes, there's a lot of fear, and yes, there's a lot of concern, and yes, there's a lot of kind of feeling disenfranchised by the current situation in many ways, whether that's the housing catastrophe, the climate catastrophe, the mental health challenges of people, and the COVID pandemic, just to name a few. This is actually something that it feels really exciting to talk about. So, and it feels exciting to be hopefully signing off on today, and to then be kind of carrying out and living through over the next 30 years and creating that Kapiti of the future. So again, I'd like to thank staff for really harnessing that sentiment of growing well and not just managing or mitigating growth, but we should be growing in a way that has no need of being mitigated, or has no need kind of to even really be managed, because we've got the strategy that takes us through these principles, these priorities, and then which creates the kind of growth that we want anyway. And so I think it's a really exciting prospect. The focus on sustainability, the focus on intergenerational equity, and not only being able to leave, warm, dry, affordable housing for our next generation, but also being able to leave a more interconnected and accessible kapiti for everyone, is a legacy that I want to be a part of leaving. And so this really feels like a positive step in that direction. And so I'm just grateful that we've been able to have so many workshops, so many briefings leading us to this point now, alongside our mana whenua partners, and to now be in this position where we're starting to think, and starting to kind of have it being not forced upon us, but have it being kind of passed on, that intensification is the way. And it's very, very exciting, as Gwyn talked about, to think about, Paraparaumu becoming a city, and for us to have, all of the string of pearls only continuing to be enhanced. And so I think, it's a really exciting prospect. Again, just a real kind of plug for a focus on active modes of transport. We know that the idea of 15-minute neighbourhoods is something that was talked about through and submitted upon into this process. And I just want to also acknowledge staff for thinking about and really responding to that call for recognising how all of these various elements of the strategy could be knitted together. And I feel satisfied that has been done to a greater degree than it was when we saw it a few months ago. So I would like to thank staff for that. But again, there's even more opportunities as we go through this to focus on active transport, to focus on how we continue to build community through the ways that people get around and through the ways that people live generally, and also connecting this into our use of open spaces as well, and greening kapiti. So again, priorities and aspirations, I think we've got it bang on, and I'm excited to be a part of actualizing these aspirations and priorities, and noting one of those as being achieving climate neutral living. And so I think it's important, again, as I mentioned, that this can't just sit on the shelves, and if it's something that we're going to commit to in the way that we grow, it's also got to be something that we commit to across other processes. And when we're thinking about, prioritizing spending, it's got to be something that we also have front of mind, in my view, because those priorities and aspirations are things that cut across so many different things, and have buy-in from our community and our iwi partners, and all of us too. So we'd just like to say a huge thank you again, and really looking forward to hearing other people's whakaaro on this through debate, and would also encourage fellow councillors to support this.
Councillor Boswell.
Kia ora, and thank you. Thank you. I just really want to thank the staff and acknowledge the work that they have done. We have had an enormous amount of workshops and briefings, and that was to create the principles of this strategy. And even today, we again reflect on those principles, and thank you to the staff for holding fast to those principles that we all agreed on right from the get-go. It was very interesting to hear and to see so many submissions come in, and particularly to hear the developers come in and speak about their ideas and aspirations for our district. It's not often that we actually get to hear from developers. They don't often come into our council chambers to talk to us. It's normally done through the staff. So it was really quite humbling and pretty amazing to hear their visions for our district, and for our staff to be able to interweave their aspirations and the community's aspirations to how we move forward. And the intensification is a funny old thing. I agree with it. I've seen intensification around the world that has worked immensely well, particularly for, in that economic development sense. It is, definitely a positive thing for our economic and social well-being, people living together in town centres, supporting one another, and bringing back that original community feel that we have grown up with. I think that our district has spread out so thin and across the lands and across into green space that we have lost some of that community interaction that we have had in the past. So if we need to intensify that to bring back that Kiwi community, I can see that happening. And already you see examples of really beautifully well-built, architecturally designed structures that are 3 stories. We've seen it down at Roemary Beach, where that has that's really improved that area. And prior to that, there was 1 house there, and I think that there's up to about 16 units. So it's that kind of stuff that we are already doing in our district, and this is just intensifying that across different areas. And likewise down at Paraparaumu Beach, there's several different developments going down there. So it's really exciting times for the Kapiti Coast, and I'm really pleased to see this district growth strategy landing today. And this will be a foundation document that will be referred to all the time. And I think it links really nicely with a whole lot of other strategies that that our teams have been working on across the organisation for you know, special, unique and really lovely growth within Kapiti. So for that reason, I'll be supporting it today. I think it's really exciting times for us.
Right. Councillor Elliott.
Look, thank you very much to everyone for helping bring us to this stage and what has been a very, very long process, but a worthwhile one. 30,000 homes in 30 years cannot happen well without really good planning. So it's been a real privilege to be part of this process. And I'm really looking forward to the day when industry supply chains are up to the ask, and that we get some sort of normality in the building sector and get this work started properly. We're doing the preparation now to ensure that this building and construction is done really responsibly as far as waste, construction, demolition waste, and we have fortunately now got waste diversion in place and being put together. And I also always think that growth planning is an opportunity to plan our green spaces, and I really hope that we have responsibly enabled the opportunity for the Kapiti Coast's beautiful green environmental features to be the PO that guides our future development. Please don't forget that small guiding principle, folks, over the next 30 years. You know, it was certainly the intention of some of us at the table that the green spaces guide where the development happens. Thank you.
Right. I'm just going to put the recommendations. We vote separately, A, B, and C. The first one, all 3 moved by Councillor McCann and seconded by Councillor Elliott. The first one is A, that the council adopt the district growth strategy to buy growing well. All those in favour, you can cast your votes.
We seem to have 10 in favour, and I'm just, unless we have somebody that's left the meeting, is somebody deciding?
What have we got?
10 in favour, so I'm just, Councillor Buswell, are you yet to vote?
I voted.
Yeah,
I have voted.
I can see that.
I can see it now.
So you got.
I had voted previously. This always seems to happen.
It's Councillor Pravanov who hasn't put up a vote.
Councillor Pravanov. Even if you can signal to us, give us a thumbs up, show us the indication.
Councillor Provanov, are you able to vote for us, please?
We can't hear you.
I actually asked about 2 or 3 minutes ago to have the recommendations put up on the screen, please. And I've just sent you I'd sent Tanika a comment and also you, Guru.
No.
You see the wording of it, please?
Yeah, I just sent it through to you via email because.
Oh well, yeah. Obviously, I haven't been looking at my email, so just give me a minute and I'll just find that.
Here you go, Councillor. So we're voting on the first one.
Yeah.
So the first one the one we're voting on is A, as we had previously done, that the council adopt the district growth strategy.
So
right?
where's that? There's no actual A on that, what I can see on the screen?
Yeah, the one
or are they labelled?
Yeah.
That council adopt the district growth strategy to typify growing well.
Okay, yeah. So it's just there's 3 recommendations, and we talk about A, B, and C, and even then. So I just want to have clarity. That's all. Okay,
Right.
so I will vote for that.
Okay, so that's carried. Now we are going on to recommendation B.
Can everybody please clear your votes? Okay, we still have 2. Councillor Elliott.
So I'm not sure what the second one is.
And Councillor Buswell, can I just?
It's always good to know what we're voting on.
So you can see the council agrees to an.
I can't seem to remove my.
I've just done that, Councillor. I've just done that. So now, Councillor Provanov,
okay.
The council agrees to an editorial group comprising the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Chief Executive and Councillor McCann to approve any further editorial changes to the document prior to publication.
Yep. Okay, I've done that, yep.
So Tanika, what's the score?
Oh, hold on.
We are only at 7 votes at the moment, Your Worship.
Has everybody voted though?
And we only have 8, so we require 3 more.
So who hasn't voted?
Councillor Randall?
Councillor Randall.
Oh, Councillor Buswell again. Sorry, Councillor, it doesn't seem to be coming through.
He's having problems.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. I hit it.
Yeah, I see it now. I see it now.
Yeah.
So we have 11 in favour.
Okay, so that's carried. Now the last one, C. Can you put it up on the screen? Right. So we can vote for that one.
Could we please just have everybody, let me just clear all the feedback from the last one. There we go. So we have, at this moment, we have 8 in favour and 1 opposed. So 2 votes. Councillor so we're still missing.
Who are we missing?
Sorry, Councillor Buswell, if we could just keep all our votes up. So Councillor Randall, have you voted? Okay, so I believe I have 10 votes in favour and 1 vote against.
And whose vote is against?
Councillor Hanford.
Okay. That's carried. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of that particular item. Can I just have a quick chat with the councillors about the time that we've got? I'm suggesting that we can the session with the senior leadership team. Otherwise, we will not be getting a break. So the next item we are looking at is the appointment to the Greater Wellington Regional Council's Site Tour Committee. Item 10.3, appointment to the Greater Wellington Regional Council Site Tour Committee. We got Rita O'Brien.
Cool. Thank you for the opportunity for addressing you on this matter. As you're aware, establishing the Whātua committees across the Wellington region is Greater Wellington's response to the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. The committee's recommendations are important, and they include things like the vision and objectives for freshwater bodies and receiving environments. These will be incorporated in due course into the Greater Wellington's Regional Policy Statement, which has implications for our district planning type stuff, as well as their own regional planning. They've signalled the intention to consult on the Regional Policy Statement in August this year. The water quality and quantity targets and limits for each of the Whātua areas. These will be in due course incorporated into the the Natural Resources Plan through plan changes. So there'll be the overarching rules, but each Whātua will have its own chapter at the end of that plan. They're looking to roll all of the Whātua processes into one plan change. The other thing that will come out of these recommendations is methods. So they'll be looking at non-regulatory and regulatory methods. So that can include things like, I suppose, education and stuff that's not necessarily people required to do, guidelines. and also they can also, through the Whātua committee, make recommendations for district plans. And through that, and also activity and asset management planning. So it can actually have implications for, financial bottom lines and where we spend our money. So they've requested an appointment of a Kapiti Coast District Council councillor and an alternative to be on the Whātua committee. They anticipate that the whole Kapiti Whātua, will be completed within 12 months. This is very ambitious because all the other Whātuas took a lot longer. They have an absolute deadline of the 30th of May next year to complete our Whātua. And that's to ensure they have enough time to do their big plan change. The National Policy Statement has a hard deadline of the end of 2024 for them to have notified a plan change that has targets in it, water quality targets. So they're up against a high deadline now as well. I can't actually tell you much about what this committee is going to look like because they're not quite sure yet either. They're committed to developing a terms of reference for the committee with iwi and Kapiti Coast District Council, but there are no details yet. And that terms of reference will include things like the exact nature of the treaty house model they're going to use, the scope, the definition or scope of what the committee will look at, membership, obviously, even meeting schedules, how often they'll meet, and the expectations and the decision-making processes. They do hope to have this terms of reference completed by March, with a first committee meeting being held in April. So that's a bit of a cook's talk. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right, any questions? Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rita. Look, I'm just curious, how does this all tie into the Three Waters, so to speak? I guess Three Waters are they? I guess Three Waters not looking after this sort of water quality if it's going elsewhere. As such, is this sort of outside that equation as such?
It should all be under the same umbrella. One of the main drivers for the Three Waters reform is Te Mana o Te Wai. So they were concerned about the environmental bottom lines of the provision of Three Waters. And any Three Water entity, one would assume, would have to comply with Greater Wellington's plan. They'd be sort of providing the infrastructure in accordance with the regional planning's constraints anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Right, any other questions? Councillor Elliott.
Not a question, Your Worship. I can't see any questions there, but I'd like to move recommendation A, please.
Right.
James is up.
Hold on, Councillor Coates has got a question.
Thank you, Worship. Sorry, Councillor Elliott, I popped it up just as you commented. Possibly a question for Rita or our Chief Executive. What is the importance of this role in terms of the impact on our council and on our district? And then the follow-up question to that is, what is the expected workload? I'm thinking in terms of whoever puts their name forward or has their name put forward understands firstly the importance, and secondly the time commitment or intention required to do the role justice. So be interested to know responses to those two.
I can start a response. I think it is actually important. The recommendations from this committee will feed into the regional policy statement, the regional plan. It will have implications on how we spend our money. For example, the Porirua Waitua process were very focused on wastewater overflows into the environment. So there was actually quite a lot of effort around the monitoring, about actually recommending that systems be upgraded. So it can actually have quite far-reaching implications across the district. And in terms of the workload, I actually can't answer that, and I don't think Greater Wellington can either. Potentially, it is actually a huge commitment, and that's why I've kind of we've asked for an alternative as well. There'll be a lot of reading, I would imagine. They have no idea what the meeting frequency might be. Yeah, so
it's more likely to be more work rather than less, though, isn't it?
I would have thought so, yes, and it is actually a Greater Wellington-led process. So as council officers at this end, we kind of, I don't know, we have limited control over what that might look like in the end, although we will be involved in that tour of that terms of reference. So we could actually, through that process, think about what is sensible in terms of workload. Because it's not fair, and it's that whole, they've compressed it into a year as well, and it's an election year. So it's a bit of a perfect storm. It's
The current, as was pointed out, the current Waitua processes have taken between 3 to 5 years and are largely not resolved. And they think they're going to do this one in a year. So the only way you could do that was with a lot more compressed workload. And the other issue is the first one in the Wairarapa went so badly that the district council had to do its own work to and get its own consultants to oppose the findings from the process of that committee. And that's what can happen if this is not done well. So it is both very significant and it's potentially very time consuming.
Thank you, Wayne. That's helpful.
And I know that in some sense, because I sit in the governance two-house structure for the Waikanae River, they have been speaking quite highly of the process that's been engaged there to as a sort of a cutting-edge approach, not done elsewhere, and therefore they are quite convinced that the process will be faster than the other ones. Anyway, I know that the councillor, about a month ago, I think Councillor Pravnov had wanted to put a hand up for that post. I was quite keen to also push the Deputy Mayor to as the alternate. Anyway, Councillor Elliott, you put your hand up.
Oh, yes, please. I would like to nominate Councillor Pravanov, please, for position A and recommendation A.
Have you got a seconder for that?
Yes, Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Councillor Hanford. Okay. Anybody else? No. Can we look at the B?
Councillor Compton has his hand up.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I just had a question, and it sort of came up from a point that was made previously there. Obviously, there is the small matter of that election on the 8th of October, and other than me, who's not standing again, no one's guaranteed that they're going to be back here on the 9th of October. So you'll have 6 months of work on this, and then there's still another, what, 7-8 months to get you through to the 30th of May. So how does that process resolve itself in terms of the local body elections, and you potentially have your appointee or the alternate not returned? Would they stay on effectively as representatives on behalf of the council? Is that how it's envisaged, or would the incoming council next triennium have to reappoint a new primary and alternate?
Yeah, normally after the elections, we dish out the different appointments and stuff. I think that's when we manage it. And then at the moment, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I think through that terms of reference process, they are envisaging having some sort of process or acknowledging that, because they've obviously got a regional council elective member there as well. So there will be a process of managing that.
Cool. Okay, just the first one appointed by Councillor Pravnov.
We also have Councillor Hanford requesting to speak.
Hold on, I think Councillor Elliott nominated her, seconded by Councillor Hanford. Right, so can we manage that one first? Any questions on to the candidates? Anything else? No, if not, can I just put it to the vote? The council confirms the appointment of Councillor Pravanov. This is moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Hanford. Can we cast your...
Councillor Pravanov is asking an interesting question. Can she vote?
Well, you can, but it wouldn't make any difference because I think got enough votes.
There's 10 votes in favour.
Okay, now that's carried. Now the next one is the I'm proposing Deputy Mayor Janet Holbrook as the alternate. Can I have a seconder for that? Somebody speak. Can I have a seconder?
McCann? I think it's Councillor McCann.
Yep. Okay. The council confirms the appointment of Deputy Mayor Holbrook, nominated by Councillor Mayor Guru, seconded by Councillor McCann. Please cast your votes.
Just 7.
Was not voted.
So Councillor Holborough is not, and then we need Councillor Randall.
So how many votes?
We have 8.
We have 8. And Councillor Holborough, you didn't vote for yourself? Okay, we just note that what it is, but you've got the majority that's carried.
Yeah, I'm just going, yeah. Just bear with me, Your Worship.
So to those people, congratulations. Look forward to the great amount of work, and hopefully you get into there next year.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, where we are at now, 10.4, reports and recommendations from standing committees and community boards. We've got 3 recommendations.
So through you, Your Worship. So this paper speaks to the reports and recommendations considered by our standing committees and community boards from the 1st of November 2021 through to the 8th of February 2022. I will take the report as read, noting that councillors are being asked to consider 2 recommendations from the Waikanae Community Board and 1 from the Parapara Community Board. So through you, Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. The Waikanae one, both of them, so the council notes the request. Do we have a staff response to this too?
I'm not sure if we have the GM responsible.
You know, we need some kind of response. I mean, yes, we know that. If that has not been arranged, can we just move that we note it, and then I'll ask that the staff give a response to us after what we have noted.
So we have Councillor Pravanov has a raised hand, and Community Board Chair Kathy Spires.
Okay, hold on. Councillor Pravanov, you can go first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I suppose I'm just raising the matter that these 2 recommendations are written as to be noted rather than to be agreed with. And I just, you know, I would like those words changed. I hear what you're saying in terms of there's no senior council staff members to speak to this, but I'm fully aware that when they are noted, that is all that happens when the board has actually requested some actions here. I don't know whether James Westbury wishes to make some comment as well, but it might be a small word, but it actually makes a huge difference. So if I can have my recommendation is to have that those words changed to agree to.
No, I think that's where the difficulty is. What I'm suggesting is that we note it, but request a staff response to this. Unless we get the staff advice there, I don't want to be in a situation where we agree to it.
So
I think that's basically our point. Until we can go away and investigate the request, you don't have anything on which to base a decision. So it isn't appropriate for us to make a decision until we've had that analysis put in front of you. And so when we take these minutes forward, we'll go and do that work and come back to you.
Okay, so can we just note that, because this is a process that we need to follow every time. The same thing pops up all the time. Look, we noted, but we want council staff response to this too.
So can I just add, Mr. Mayor, that one of these recommendations was made at the beginning of November. It is now February.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay, so just so
Mr.
I'm
Chief
clear
Executive, hold on.
as to
Mr.
how...
Mr. Chief Executive, that's a relevant point. We should have been able to get some kind of staff response to this by now.
Both of them are actually November.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm pleased to note that that obviously wasn't quite our top priority in the last 2 or 3 months, so it hasn't hit the top end, and we're really sorry about that. If we could have, we would have.
So can then, I suppose, how is this going to progress from here, and is there a time frame by which that will occur, please?
Councillor Pravanov, can you leave that to the Mayor to pursue?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I'm going to put this to the councillors. That the council notes the following recommendations of the Waikanae Community Board, 9th November 2021, bullet point 1 and 2. All those in favour, can you just...
Excuse me, Your Worship. So do you have a mover and a seconder for those?
Oh, I moved it. Sorry, I missed.
Your Worship, there are a few hands up. I'm not sure if you wish to look at that.
Let's just say that I moved it and Councillor Holbrook has seconded it. And now I see Councillor Pravanov, you got your hand up.
I know Kathy was actually waiting after me, so I'll let her go first, but then I'd like to make another comment, please.
So the only other one I've got a hand up is Kathy, but I'm sure Kathy's going to raise it on her community board issue, isn't it?
Correct.
So can you wait on that one first?
Oh, okay. You want me to wait?
Yeah, so we sort out the Waikanae one.
Okay, yeah, all good. Yeah.
So there are no other anybody else putting the hands up on that one, so we can go back and then sort out the votes. So this moved by myself and then seconded by Councillor Holbrook that we note those two bullet points.
So yes, I did want to make I actually wanted to make another.
Hold on, we are voting now.
Councillor Pravanov, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually wanted to make another recommendation. So
can you wait until we finish this too?
Pardon?
Can you wait until we finish this too?
Okay.
So have all of us voted?
Your Worship, I just need to check that all the elected members are in the meeting because I only have 7 votes.
But that's a quorum.
It is?
It's quorum, so just move. So you got 7 votes?
No, we have 8 votes for positive and Councillor Pravanov has declined.
Okay, so that's carried.
Carried.
And I give you assurance that I will follow up the staff response to those. Now back to you, Councillor Pravanov. You have a...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the reason I voted against that is because I didn't know whether the next recommendation that I would like to include is actually agreed to as well. And I think really by actually council agreeing to noting these 2 recommendations, there's no record of the conversation that has gone on, and that the Mayor has agreed to follow up these 2 recommendations by the community board.
I think that will be minuted. That's the way to go. And so, and this, what we're dealing with, actually the reports, the recommendations from planning committees and community boards. That's what we're dealing with. That's why this is here. I will not take yours as another recommendation on top of that. What I'm suggesting that I'll follow up, the staff response will be minuted in the minutes.
Yeah, so can I have a surety that this conversation will be minuted, please?
Well, I mean, you obviously will. Okay, now we are going on to B. It is fine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to speak to the recommendation from the Community Board, as I have spoken recently with Mr. Dennis Grant and Roger Foley, who both are Manly Street North residents. And at the time of the beach bylaw review, both of them thought that the process we were using, only debating the closure access point, and that if it remained in access, the conditions applying under the old bylaw would transfer automatically through to the new bylaw. Now, Mr. Foley has also got a disability himself. And over the Christmas period, the Kapiti Boating Club parks were absolutely jam-packed, and vehicles and boats and cars were parked beyond the limited zone, which means that people with disabilities, they have nowhere to park anymore. And I hear that some people even had tickets down at the Kapiti Boating Club. So when all the space is taken up by the boaties, where are people with disabilities able to park? There's nowhere. So all we're asking for is for councillors, if they could please review only just the section 16.3. That's me.
It's, this again is serious in the sense that you're wanting to review the decision that's already made. I don't know what the technical processes are around that. I think it would be quite a lot. So again, I will ask for staff response to this unless the Chief Executive has got something to say now.
No, nothing to add, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, as with other recent discussion points, this is something that's only recently been concluded. So revisiting it is not straightforward, to say the least, because I'm not sure how you get to a different decision, but we'll take that away and we'll bring it back to the council.
Okay.
Thank you.
So somebody like to move B and second it?
Your Worship, we have James Westbury has his hand up, and then also Councillor Halliday.
I'll go to Mr. Westbury. James Westbury, if we are going to go back and discuss the Waikanae one, I think we've gone past that.
This isn't just about the Waikanae issue, Guru. It's actually about making sure there's a really clear process, to be honest, for what happens to community board requests or notings. I think there's a really unclear view from community boards as to what the council does with its requests or notes. So it would be really clear to have something that's documented about how council will receive and what they will do about certain actions. At the moment, it just leaves us in a void about, we have an expectation that council will do something and then it gets lost in approving the note, for example, as opposed to seeing any action from it. So it would be good if there is a clear process going forward.
Okay.
And given that there's such a length of time gone past since we raised these issues, you know, and nothing seems to have eventuated, it would be good if something can be formalized, so we have clarity about what happens and when, or if something is going to happen. I know we can't force council to do anything, but we can ask them to.
No, it's a
we
process.
need some clear process around this.
It's a process issue you're taking, and I take your point. There's a discussion we'll have. Martin Holiday.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just curious. I noted in the traffic bylaw that, that what was built into that was changes that could be made, minor changes potentially made via resolution, which was built into that traffic bylaw, I guess, to help circumnavigate, well, not circumnavigate, it's the wrong word to use, but to allow a pathway for adjustments. Look, I note that that wasn't done with the beach bylaw, so I'm assuming because that aspect or pathway is not there, this will have to go through a consultation process if there's to be a change. Would that be right?
Well,
and that's what makes it a little bit
too complex. So all I'm saying is that again, you need to come back to us.
Mr. Mayor, as the councillor was suggesting, minor editorial changes are always set up to allow a subset of the elected members to work with staff on minor editorials, such as grammatical changes. When you're asking for a policy change, you couldn't delegate that to a subset of councillors or staff without going through the proper process, and especially when we talk about bylaws. That's obviously as a statutory rating. So no, we couldn't do that.
Oh no, I appreciate this, Maxwell. I was just saying that was a resolution process was put in part of the traffic bylaw to address things like this, but we don't have that process with the beach bylaw. Would that be right?
No, just to reiterate, that wasn't put in place for the traffic bylaw. Minor editorial changes are things where the grammar is wrong. You couldn't make a change to what the bylaw does without going through a whole consultation. And we did do the same for every one of those documents. So we, through the steps of the beach bylaw, we absolutely did the same thing, where we delegate the ability for minor editorial changes to a subset.
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused now. We just had the traffic bylaw, and there was, through the bylaw itself, references to resolutions that can be done to change things. Is that not correct?
You're wrong. Okay. If we do take that offline, Mr. Mayor, because I'm not quite sure where Councillor Halliday is referring, and so we could take that offline and have a conversation about it.
Okay.
Thank you,
Councillor Rendell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I am agreeing with Mr. James Westbury, and I mean, in the previous triennium, when I was on the community board, we did have a process, and that process got changed, and I've mentioned it a number of times, and I think the community boards are being unfairly treated with this word noted, and I've mentioned it before, but no one's taken any notice. In regards to the beach bylaw, I spoke to Mr. What's his name? The guy in charge of a regulatory team, James Jefferson, and he gave me an assurance that he would look at it some time ago. But I would like to take that offline. I mean, I think he was quite sympathetic, and maybe we should be looking at this offline. That's my view.
I agree. Offline, we can look into this. Jocelyn Pravanov.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So, thinking a little bit more on my feet in relation to the Waikanae Community Board issues, the notings, I would actually, if possible, please, I'd like to have it written into the agenda at this point in time, please, so that we can see the wording for it.
I've just told you before that
is not actually writing it into the agenda, Mr. Mayor.
No, I've told you before that this will be minuted, that the mayor will look into this in terms of the staff response with the chief executive. And I also would be raising the issue what James Westbury is raised in terms of having this process sorted. So that's what I'm saying. So I'm going back to B, which I think, am I correct, Martin, you've moved there? That council notes the following recommendations.
Sure.
Okay. Can I have a seconder for that? No seconder.
Is that Councillor Rendell?
Councillor Rendell seconds it. So can we then just vote that the fact that the council notes the following recommendations on Paraparaumu Rameti Community Board, 23rd November 2021, and that bullet point down there and everything else. Can you just make your voting mark, please?
So we have 1 against, 1 abstention, and 8 votes in favour.
Okay, so that's carried. The last one is the council receives the report of the recommendation report from standing committees and committee boards, and you've got all of them there. It's just a standard process. I'll move it. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Holbrow, can you all make your mark?
Oops, no. So we have 8 votes in favour and 1 against.
Okay, so that's carried. Thank you very much. We now go to the item 11, confirmation of minutes for the council meeting of the 25th of November last year and the 9th of December last year. Any issues with those minutes? Otherwise, can somebody move that the minutes of the council meeting for the 25th November 2021 be accepted as a true and correct record?
Councillor Buswell and Councillor McCann.
Councillor Buswell and Councillor McCann. All those in favor say, make your marks. And this very thing. We got that?
So we have 10 votes in favour.
Right. Next one is the minutes of the council meeting of 9th of December 2022. Can I have a mover?
Can we just have all votes cleared, please?
And we have Councillor Buswell and I thought I saw Councillor Hanford's digital hand up, but we now have Councillor Holborough's hand up.
Okay. So can you all make your marks now?
And we have 10 votes in favour.
Okay, so that's carried. Public speaking time for items not on the agenda. Do we have anybody? I don't suppose so.
We don't.
No, we don't, Your Worship.
Okay. Would it be a good time now to take a break for our lunch?
Yep.
I think so. So when do we want to come back for public excluded? 1:30?
Your Worship, it's 1:45
It's
to
going to be 2 o'clock.
And you have the annual plan workshop that starts at 2:30.
Yeah. So I think we should can the session with the senior leadership.
Yeah, I think that's already been proposed and accepted.
Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, we put that in the can some time ago.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So 2:30? Does that look right?
Your issue, Mr. Mayor, is I think that's the starting time for a public workshop. So you do need a decent break, but if you wish to do so, we will have to advise the adoring public of a delay in the workshop. You probably would need to open it.
So shall we say 2:15 then? 2:15?
Councillor Holbrow would like to speak.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced we'll get through the public excluded agenda after a break. And we'd be ill-advised to delay the start of a public workshop while we sit in a public excluded meeting. So my suggestion is that we open the public excluded meeting and then we adjourn it later, and then adjourn it and then recommence it later after the public workshop. That's just a suggestion.
What do people think?
Or else we take 15 minutes and we try and get through it before 2:30. But I don't think we should delay the start of a public workshop.
I may be speaking out of turn, but I believe as we're already in the open council meeting, it can be adjourned. You can start the workshop and then we can resume the council meeting and then go into publicly excluded, but I take advice from Mr. Maxwell.
Technically, that's right. I think the difference here is whether we should defer the public excluded part until after the workshop.
Yeah.
We obviously have a couple of external parties who
right.
are going to attend part of public excluded. So as long as we check in on their availability, I would probably support Councillor Holborough's suggestion, because I think everybody needs a decent break right now.
So what are we suggesting?
The suggestion would be that we take a break now. We have the workshop starting at 2:30 as planned. Depending on with what alacrity we get through that workshop, sometime between 4 and 4:30, you would be resuming this council meeting, going straight into public excluded.
Right. So we take a break now. But I'm a bit confused.
Mr. Mayor, there's no way 10 minutes of discussion is going to get you through public excluded.
No, particularly since Rob McCann has got stuff to.
I understand Councillor McCann is going to delay this by many hours of debate. So it would be a frustration to everybody if we even tried to start any of it, I think.
So, carry on, Your Worship.
So we are taking a break now. Come back. And what?
We'll start the workshop at 2:30.
Yeah.
And then
we'll adjourn this council meeting until I think technically you'll have to say 4:30, unfortunately. I'll take, because we have to advise people, you need to pass a resolution that says what you're doing. And if we went for 4, I'm just not sure if you'll be ready. I would hope you are, but can't be sure.
So of course, who are we going to signal those two outside people? They have to wait until we come back.
Yeah, one of them's already in the waiting room, so I'm sure we're in communication with them right now. The key point is you need to pass a resolution now to adjourn the meeting. If you wish, I'm sure we can be a little bit fluid. If you wish to say adjourn the council meeting until 4 p.m.
We do it right now.
Yes, you need to pass that resolution now so that we can all go and run streaming for the host.
So I hope that we adjourn this meeting.
Has his hand up, by the way.
Pardon?
Gwyn has his hand up.
Hold on. Councillor Compton.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of flag that this creates issues for those of us who have kids to pick up from daycare and that we're going to run that late. And I would have thought council meeting takes precedence over the public workshop.
I've sympathy for that, Councillor Compton. I too have to duck out and pick up kids. But the workshop has been publicly advertised, so at the very least we have to open it as scheduled. So we're in your hands in that regard.
I think it's probably a lesson about how much is being loaded into the council meeting.
Did anybody come to the public workshop last time?
I don't know.
So
but all you need is one person making noise. Okay, look.
Rob has his hand up.
Councillor McCann.
I'm just suggesting if the CE could tell me when he's going to be unavailable to oppose my suggestions, we could move quite quickly through this process. And I do say that in jest. I would like to note, though, that there has been some discussions which will hopefully speed up the process. I'm not sure it's going to be as lengthy as we think it might be, but given how long it took to get through the community board paper, I might be wrong.
All right, look, so I'm going to adjourn the meeting now, and we come back at 2:30 and start the public workshop. Hopefully that won't take too long, and then we re-adjourn the council meeting to look at the my worry is we've got two people waiting and we won't be sure when we adjourn the meeting for them to take part.
I think Mr. Maxwell had suggested saying that making the resolution to adjourn the meeting until 4:30.
If Mr. Mayor, if what you're saying is you want to follow Councillor Compton's recommendation, you probably, and you do need to specify a time for adjournment, as far as I understand. You're probably talking about adjourning until 2:35, so that you have time to open the workshop and, assuming there are no public, to defer it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you could move a resolution to adjourn this meeting until 2:35 and have a seconder and pass that, we can all get some lunch.
Right. So I move that we adjourn this meeting until 2:35. Can I have a second?
Is that yourself, Mr. McCann?
Councillor McCann seconds it. All those in favour? Thank you, Marks. Boom.
Your Worship, we've had something come up on the chat from Councillor Elliott in regards to checking whether externals are available at 4:30, but I think we've moved past that now to be able to come back at 2:35.
Well, we
we'll
just move.
have a conversation offline with external parties.
Yeah. Okay,
so that is 10 in favour, Your Worship. So we're carried.
So that's carried. We come back at 2:35. Thank you very much. Lunch is served.